start with I don't think you need a whole new update to a comp plan. I think it's been 3, 4, 5 years. The demographics, obviously, there's no reason to do that now. Let's do it out in a year and a half. So there's no reason to put a number down in a year and a half now. It's real. One thing that the short time that I've been involved is there's two sort of things I think that need to be looked at, maybe three. First thing would probably be is future land use, and not as much the map as sort of a visioning of what it's been 4 or 5 years. Has a vision or a desire changed? It talks about rural and residential and nature and stuff like that. Has that changed or not? And that may just be a one workshop sort of session with the council going over what do we see, what do we feel, what's changed, if anything, in the last 4 or 5 years. That may just be something of that nature. And then if there's any glaring things in the future land use map, that maybe they look at that at that time. And the other thing that really was brought up, I think Lisa brought up to us when we first started getting involved, is 205, obviously, and the state coming through and changing it. If it's a year from now or 2 years now, 3 years now, it's in the short-term horizon, shall we say. And their takings are going to have a big play on what happens up and down 205, which is where basically all the commercial zoned land is. And you're going to render a lot of that as pretty much worthless or lose its ability to be developed because you're losing land on either side and it wasn't that deep. So maybe it's not part of this comp plan, but maybe it's a component that needs to be added onto or something is to discuss is where does McLendon-Chisholm want to go commercially in the next 5 years or 10 years, and how do we go about doing it? Strips up and down Highway 205s of the world isn't the answer, and it probably was an answer back when 205 was just 205 and not the connection between now Rockwall and Terrell or wherever you're going to. I always go up and down 205 to get to Interstate 20 from Rowlett. You know, I'm passing through. And that's about it. But a lot of people are using it now to get home and everything too. So I think that may be one component that needs to be looked at. It's not part of the comp plan now. It's sort of in the future land use. But maybe a separate component on where we want to be commercially. Do we want to have a grocery store? I'm not saying a grocery store is going to, as everyone knows, it's rooftops, which is the same as location. And brick and mortar is, we all order something on Amazon or somewhere in your house the next day, if not literally later that day. So brick and mortar isn't where it was 5 years ago and definitely wasn't where it was 25 years ago. But I think with the changes up 205, I think that is a good starting point to look to see where we want to be. We've had, there's no secrets. Dollar General was looking at something with the Board of Adjustment and was denied. There are other people that Lisa and I are talking to about commercial things. So I think that is something that, with the population growth that's happening, is something that needs to happen. And then the other thing that Lisa and I have been sort of saddled with, because it was pre-Lisa and pre-me, are some of these older PDs that are out there that are very large and made a lot of promises in the Great Recession. I don't know why it was a Great Recession, but whatever, the 2008 time period, making promises of things that probably weren't going to happen in 2008 if there was or wasn't a recession, and definitely aren't going to happen now. That we need to maybe look at that. And that may not be a comprehensive planning document, but something needs to be looked at, because there's a lot of density laying out there on the table that maybe is not appropriate anymore, or maybe never was appropriate. And obviously the thing that's really, there's really one thing that is stopping development in McLendon-Chisholm. I think we all know it's septic systems. That's not stopping it, but it's your limitation. Yeah, you're restricted to a lot size that basically dictates what you're going to build and everything. And I don't know if that's good or bad. It has good points and bad points, obviously. But those are things that need to factor in there, because the sewer connections aren't there. There are very few left, we'll say, in the big picture of it. But at some point, maybe someone jumps out there and does something big and makes some line going somewhere, and that's something we need to look at and stuff. So those are the things I see happening. Future visioning thing, are we still where we want to be, where we were 5 years ago? Do we still see that as where we want McLendon-Chisholm to be in 5 or 10 more years? Then I think the concentration should be on commercial development. Do we? Where do we want it? Who do we want? How do we want? State law changes in mere weeks, where you're now out of the, will soon be out of the aesthetic business. You know, I'm not saying that someone is going to build $1 million home and put up plywood siding, but if it complied with the code, they'd have that right to do it. It's just not going to happen because you're not going to sell $1 million house with plywood siding and stuff. You may have hardy board, and that may be good or bad. Hardy board is not a bad product and stuff. It may not be good for a whole house, but it's not going to affect you on that type of situation. Commercial development, it would affect you. I'm sure they do. Yeah.
So is it your opinion that the current comprehensive plan provides enough guidance and direction for you and for planning and zoning and for board of adjustments and for the city administrator to do your job?
I think it does, but I think it needs to be looked at. I think that's that visioning stuff. Future land use, current land use, current stuff, that changes. The day it was published, it was already out of date. It's that visioning stuff, and it may not be as much as just statements. This is what we want to see. These are some principles we like to have, some policies we want. We want X, we want Y, we don't want Z, that kind of stuff. That it's more, not as much of a map or a graphic as principles. That what you want, what the city council, what the citizens want to see.
Well, that's, I think, what I was thinking about is putting together citizens, such as what we have with the Economic Development Committee. We already have something in place that can do that, the vision for the city.
Yeah, but I was curious if we moderate that discussion, what is the process? I mean, do you have town halls? Do you have, like...
Well, I think in a larger city, you would have town halls, groups of them. I don't know if you need groups of meetings, maybe 1 or 2 meeting at most, and you may, if you have a committee in place, and small committees work better than big committees because we all know big committees usually don't work, is you can have someone like our firm moderate that, keep people sort of focused so they're not going off into tangents about, I don't know anything about the snow cone place, but the snow cone place, or I noticed a whole bunch of cars parked over there down the street for sale now, across from the Oasis place. No. It's in the ETJ, but still, okay, fine. Let's get back to what we can deal with, that sort of stuff. But I think it's almost like bullet points. What do you see in the community? That kind of stuff, and sort of digest that kind of stuff. In the last 5 years, I don't know what the population growth has changed, but you've got a lot more people in town, and that may swing it to more rural, or it may be I want high rises. They don't want high rises, but you know what I mean. You don't know where that new population is coming from, and what they're. I would guess they're probably still, they moved here for a reason, and it wasn't to be in the middle of a 2,000 square foot lots and houses stacked on top of each other.
So are you able to develop an estimated cost sheet based on just doing the facilitation section that Jim's talking about, all the way up to a fully redone comprehensive plan?
Yeah, I think we can work on some steps there. I don't think the whole plan needs to be done. There are sections in here that maybe are premature to work on now. Public facilities, there may be some more public facilities coming into place, but they're not such that all of a sudden we've gone from 0 to 20 or something like that. It's an incremental that maybe 3 or 4 years from now, when we have more public facilities, that's something to look at. Housing, again, it's those sort of things. I think the critical path items are one. And I don't know about critical path, but maybe the order is the visioning. Where have we changed? Is our motto still the same? Is it still where we want to go in 5 years from now? And if it is, then that's then doesn't take a whole lot of tweaking, maybe change the words, emphasize something, I don't know. I really think that a pressure is going to be on that commercial development, I really do. And with 205, you're going to have some sites that are obviously still good on 205 because they have depth, but you'll have a lot of it that won't. So I really think that's something that's really not taken into account in here that much. And I'm not saying there's going to be well, there's obviously a Costco down the street. There's not going to be a Walmart because you can go 8 miles or 10 miles either direction and get all that, but you're still going to have commercial. You're still going to have, and maybe it's a family restaurant or something that caters to those kind of things that need to be looked at. That there are some commercial development standards in here that when I read some of the stuff that's here and in the zoning ordinance, that I'm like, okay, that's really good in lots of parts of Dallas and stuff, but it's not going to happen anytime here in my lifetime. I don't see a lot of that mixed use stuff happening in McLendon-Chisholm in the next 20 years. I don't see it. But I think there's the commercial stuff, and looking at that commercial can then lead to some possible changes in the zoning ordinance that I think that Lisa and I are butting our heads against on a weekly basis on some of the stuff that maybe it needs to stay in there, maybe it doesn't. But that's some of the suggestions that our firm can make to P&Z and then to y'all about some changes in the zoning ordinance. I know some things that Lisa and I are trying to implement, schedules on things, dates you have to turn things in, a more rigid sort of schedule so that the reviews can be done so we can get you the material the right way and everything. I asked her about, well, what's the zoning case number? We've got one in the P&Z this week. She goes, we don't number them. And I said, well, from now on, we're going to start numbering them. Mm-hmm. So we need to track that, you know. You're not a big city, but you're a big town now. And you're growing every month. I would guess you're getting building permits, so you're growing every month. So you're getting it from a small town into a medium town into a big town, and then eventually you'll get into a small city. But we've got to start implementing things like putting numbers on zoning cases. Mm-hmm. Number 1, number 2, the first year, at the end. You know, those little things like that, and a schedule that we can publish to say, yeah, guys, okay, it's a small town and we can work with you, but at some point, I got to have more than a week before she's got to be able to advertise, and I got to advertise tomorrow, and I can't do it today. You know, I got to have some time and stuff. You know, so I think that's some of the stuff that's not comp planning, but things that Lisa and I are trying to put in place to make it easier for y'all, so then we can give you a better product.
I think something else too is developers, I think sometimes they call and they're a little bit confused. So they see 1.5 acre minimum, but then they also see that we have a couple of PDs in town and we've compromised that. So I think maybe if we could go in and reaffirm either you do or you don't, or what the terms, if we're going to compromise, what things are we willing to compromise on in a plan development. So I think those are kind of where we need to just do some general cleanup.
Yeah, you know, we need guidance from y'all about, you know, because 1 acre lots may be acceptable if we get X, Y, and Z. You know, if they're going to donate a park and fund it for a while or something of that general nature, well, okay, well then that half acre then that was to be used by that family is now a park that they can use, and there's some of those facilities and stuff.
But if it's truly a hard and fast 1.5, we need to tell them that up front. So
yeah.
that they don't invest time for something that's not going to happen.
Mm-hmm. And another timeline.
Yeah, there's stuff that we're looking at on a couple of PDs with developers agreements and stuff like that we really need to. The box.
Yeah.
The box that I read, and then after reading it, she sends me the summary, and I was like, oh, why did you send me the summary first? I read the whole.
I found the summary first.
The cliff notes she sends after I've read the whole book.
That's where I found it after I read it.
Yes, yeah. And then the attorney and I had a couple of good laughs about it.
I agree with only that if we could have kind of a range of
Sure.
closest, that this would be basically coming up with some ideas all the way through.
Yeah.
Maybe not a comprehensive plan.
But some, yeah, because looking at and moderating discussions is different than coming up with a whole new idea of commercial and what needs to happen. You know, that's moderating and coming up with a new vision statement is a couple meetings. Commercial might be, we got to look at everything out there, what's TxDOT going to do to it, what the effect is on that, and look at it that way. And that could then lead into, well, maybe the city needs to look at doing some rezoning. It's a tough thing to chew down on, is to call hearings and change people on zoning. But at some point, if they're losing 100 feet of their commercial in the front, they don't have much they can do. They're going to get compensated for it, but still.
Yes, I thought they could look for growth as well.
You're right. Oh, yeah.
You know, it had a traffic to it, but if it was like bridges.
Yeah. No, I see. Obviously, residential growth is going to keep it steady unless something happens on a global. 20 years ago, I used to say, unless planes start running into buildings again, the economy. Well, if something globally happens, then sure, it's globally going to change. But I think the commercial development is catching up. And like I say, it's not malls, because no one builds malls anymore. But it's small commercial things that are servicing, hopefully just McLendon-Chisholm and not the whole region, because the transportation, even with 205 improved, isn't there to serve a region, obviously. And like I say, you've got 2 region draws on either side of you, 8 to 10 miles away. It's not like I'm driving 20 or 30 miles to go to the grocery store.
So how, do you think you'll be able to have that price range by tomorrow?
By tomorrow? I can work on it.
Okay.
I can work
Tomorrow is our
on it.
budget day.
I can work on it. That's not a problem.
Good, thank you.
What else?
As far as process, would you include P and Z in the process?
Well, I think you have to. That's another opportunity for people to have a public hearing. You need to have. I think in the visioning, that's for y'all to decide on the visioning. Once something comes out of whatever committee or group or y'all, then it needs to go through P and Z to get to y'all. Mm-hmm. But if you want them to be part of a committee or something, that's it's probably best not to have all of them, just because then we're having called hearings and we're having posting items and stuff. But maybe a chairman or 1 or 2 people, 2 or 3 people from y'all, some citizens. Now we're getting into a bigger committee, but something, keep it in the 8 to 10 range probably. Because you know how it is. You start as a horse and it comes around and it's a camel with stripes when it comes back. So.
Okay.
But I can work up some ranges and stuff. Yeah. I can get you. I can be semi-dangerous. I won't be dangerous. Okay. So is that saying I'm being back tomorrow night? I can come back tomorrow night. I'm okay with that. I live in Rowlett, guys. And once you get past the first bridge, it's clear sailing. And actually, my wife said, "Oh, you're going to McLendon-Chisholm? Well, if you get done by 8:30, can you stop by Costco and get extra?" So it's costing me money.
We've got him back here on Thursday too for P and Z.
That's okay. I'll work up something. I'll send something to you. It probably won't be till lunchtime.
Thank you very much.
You bet. Thank you all.
Some commentary, some committees, and workshop ratifications. So we don't have to spend a lot of money.
You want to talk about that anymore, or do you want to move on to the next proposal?
First one, pending information.
All right. Mr. Jackson. This is Dan Jackson, and he actually sent me a proposal for a rate study for sewer. And I thought the price was reasonable, and I thought I'd let him tell you a little bit about what that process might look like. And where is your...
It should be right there.
No, I don't. Thank you.
They can be. Slideshow. From the beginning. Okay. Well, thank you. I appreciate you all the chance to come out here and talk to you tonight a little bit about water and wastewater rates, or in your case, wastewater rates in particular. As Lisa indicated, my name is Dan Jackson. I'm Vice President of Willdan Financial Services. We do water and wastewater rate consulting for cities all throughout Texas and the United States. And we help cities address a lot of the issues that you are facing as you continue to grow and as you try to incorporate the increased costs that you're looking at in the future. Lisa had asked me to talk a little bit about our firm itself, what we do, who we've done it for, and most importantly, why do a wastewater rate study? What is the benefit of doing that? What is the purpose of a study, and what would it intend to accomplish for you? So in this hopefully brief presentation, I'm going to talk a little bit about that. I want to start just by talking a little bit about Willdan itself. Willdan is a publicly traded corporation founded in 1964. It has 4 divisions and 900 employees throughout the United States right now. We have over 1,200 clients throughout North America, and we're basically considered to be a nationwide leader in water and wastewater rate analysis and in the development of rate-making methodology. But for the purposes of the state of Texas here, Willdan got its presence in Texas by buying out the firm that I started 20 years ago. I started a firm called Economist.com in 1997 doing water and wastewater rate consulting. I personally have lived in North Texas just about all my life. I live in Frisco now, went to Richardson High School, and many years ago, by the way. I have many clients here in Texas, and Willdan acquired Economist.com in 2015. We're still the same company that we were before we were acquired, and we still have the same clients that we had back then. This is a listing or just kind of an indication of the clients that the company works for. As you can see, we're very big in California and Florida. We're very big across the United States. We work in the southern tip of Florida, and we work in the inside Strait of Alaska. We also work in many foreign countries as well. We work for about 6 or 7 countries out in the Pacific because, believe it or not, they've got the same issues and challenges with regards to water and wastewater costs as you do. As a matter of fact, in many cases, it's worse because they have very limited water sources and their populations are relatively poor. So when you talk about a $1 to $2 to $3 a month increase, that's a real burden for a lot of these Pacific Island nations. But I think what you all are most interested in is what do we do here in Texas? Because it's easy to say that we work in California and Florida, that's all well and good, but it's the local environment that really is where we have our expertise. We have over 30 clients in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex itself. We have 80 clients across the state of Texas. And in the last 20 years, we've done over 250 water and wastewater rate studies for clients here in Texas alone. Many of them were awarded to us by competitive bids. Many of them were sole source projects. But I don't believe there's another firm out there that has anywhere near the experience in Texas that we have. Also, it also helps that you've got a project team and a project manager who actually is from here, I know the water issues in Texas better than anybody else does. So this right here is a listing of all the cities in the DFW area we work for. We work for a lot of your neighbors. We work for Rockwall, we work for Rowlett and Royce City, Saxe, we work for Garland and Mesquite. We work for just about every one of the major cities in the Collin-Denton County corridor. We work for Allen, DeSoto, Plano, Midlothian, McKinney, Grand Prairie, and showing that karma is a bad thing, we work for Frisco. So last year I did a rate study for Frisco, so for the first time in my 30-year career I got to raise my own water rates. So I knew what needed to be done. My wife needed to be explained, needed to have it explained to, but. And also we work for a lot of mid-sized cities too. So we work all across the Metroplex, and we understand very well the dynamics of water utilities here. This is our client list in the state of Texas. Over 80 clients all throughout the state. It's been a real blessing. I've been to every corner of the state of Texas. And like I said, there's a lot of commonality in water issues here. So let's talk about that. Why do you do a rate study? What is the purpose of doing a wastewater rate study? Why not, if you need extra revenue, why not just go in and jack up the rates by 10%? Why not do that? Well, there's a lot of reasons for that. First of all utilities are facing the same issues you are. Costs are going up. The average water and sewer utility is raising its rates by 5 to 6% every year. As a matter of fact, that trend is expected to continue. The American Water Works Association says that water and sewer rates are going to triple in the next 15 years. If you look at your neighbors, The cities that get service from North Texas Municipal Water District, North Texas has been raising its rates by 10% a year. They're building a new reservoir, the Bodark Reservoir. It's going to cost $1 billion, billion with a B. Well, that money's got to come from somewhere, and it's going to come from a lot higher rates. So all those costs are going up, and so cities have to deal with that. And so the best way to deal with that is to develop a long-term financial plan. One of the benefits of working for a wastewater and water utility is that that usage is very stable, revenues are very stable, costs are very stable. So you know years in advance when costs are going to occur. So since you know years in advance how costs are going to increase, you've got the ability to plan accordingly. Furthermore, I think it's very important to understand that the wastewater rate decision is not just a financial decision. It's a social, community, and it's a political decision. The reason is that you can have many, many different rate structures that are going to give you the revenues that you need. The question becomes, what is the most fair, just, and reasonable rate design? Well, the most fair, just, and reasonable rate design is the rate design that you decide is the most fair, just, and reasonable rate design. Different cities do it different ways. Some cities have very high monthly charges, which is great for a city because it's a guaranteed revenue source. But there's a disadvantage of that, because that means that the retired couple living alone pays the same high monthly charge as the family of 6. Other cities have very low monthly charges, and they have high volumetric rates. Well, that's good for the cities because it ties their monthly bill more to their usage, but it also is more risky for cities. Because if you have a very wet year, like what we're having here in 2019, your revenues are going to go down because people aren't going to be using as much of your service. So, for that reason, it's much more than just a financial decision. And so the purpose of the study is to give you the information you need to, as decision makers, make the best policy choices for your city. So what factors, whoops, I missed a slide. No, I didn't. What factors go into a cost of service and rate design study? Well, what factors do you have to evaluate? Well, the first thing you have to evaluate is your account growth and your system growth. You're getting a lot of growth out here. This whole area is. And so that factors into a long-term financial plan. Operating cost increases, well, cost of everything goes up by 3% a year, so you need to build that into a rate plan. Wholesale cost increases, when they go up, again, Rockwall, your neighbor Rockwall buys the water from North Texas. They have to factor in a 10% increase from North Texas's rates every year. I know that because I did their rates. So they have to factor that in, and so they do an annual increase every year, if for no other reason to incorporate that increase. But probably the single most important factor for a city like McLendon-Chisholm or any other city is going to be your capital improvement plan. And capital improvement plans impact your rates in 3 ways. 1, how much do you have to spend? 2, when do you have to spend it? And 3, how do you finance it? You see, cities, it's a lot of cities have a goal that they want to keep their rates as low as possible. That's great. I mean, that's admirable, obviously, because nobody wants to pay more for anything at any time for any reason. So obviously, people want to keep their rates low. But at the same time, you have an obligation to invest in your system. Wastewater systems are very expensive. They're expensive to build. They're expensive to maintain. Treatment plants cost a lot of money. Lift stations cost a lot of money. Wholesale providers charge a lot. And so, like any asset, those assets are going to wear out over time. And so you have to continue to invest in it, otherwise you run the risk of catastrophic failure. And so, while it's very admirable to want to keep your rates as low as possible, you have to balance that with the need to fund long-term capital improvements. Fairness and equity factors are important too. If you raise rates, you don't necessarily have to raise the rates across the board for everybody. If you have residential customers and commercial customers, you may want to look at increasing different ones by different rates. Commercial customers, for example, 30% of their wastewater bill is going to be paid for by Uncle Sam because they can write off their sewer bill on their taxes. Residential customers can't do that. So that is an incentive sometimes to raise rates higher on commercial customers and residential customers. And then finally, there are timing issues too. Some cities think they're doing their customers a favor by keeping their rates down year after year after year after year. Don't do an increase, don't do an increase, don't do an increase. That's great. Then you have to do a treatment plant expansion or a new lift station or something like that, and you have to do a 25% rate increase. Well, guess what happens? Everybody forgets about the fact that the rates were low for many years, and they focus in on that big increase, because ratepayers don't like surprises. However, if you construct a long-term financial plan that recognizes that 4 to 5 years from now you're going to have to do some big capital improvements, you can start gradually adjusting your rates now, so that by the time your big capital improvement plan comes in, your rate adjustment, your rates are already incorporated the debt service that goes to pay that. So that's the kind of information that long-term financial plans can get to you. And that's why it's very important and prudent to do it. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about how you do a cost of service study, but one of the things we do is we have a model. This is a copy of our model that we use for all of our cities. It's an internationally recognized rate-making model that helps cities decide and determine what their best rate policy is. This is what's known as a dashboard, and it helps you understand the impact of different levels of debt and different rate increases on some of your primary components. So we do that. We incorporate this model for your purposes, and we hope that would give you the information you need to help make the right choice. So onto my last chart. I mean, obviously it's a tough thing to do to try to address any kind of long-term rate plan. Nobody wants to pay more for anything, but we have to understand that costs are going up. Cost of everything goes up by 3% a year just due to inflation. So it's inevitable that rates are going to go up. So the best thing to do is to develop a long-term financial plan that helps you minimize these increases while still ensuring that you get the revenues that you need in order to fund your utility. And one of the benefits of using an outside consultant is that A, you got somebody to blame, which is always good, but B, I can tell ratepayers and I can tell anybody at a public meeting what's happening around the state. Because the challenges you're facing are the exact same challenges that all your neighbors are facing, and that every city in the state of Texas is facing, and that every state in the country is facing. Water and wastewater service, utility service is becoming more expensive, and we have to address that. And if you address it in a prudent manner, you can get the revenues you need while minimizing the impact on your ratepayers. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have about the process and how long it would take and what the results would ultimately be.
Exactly how long would it take to do the study?
Generally about 60 days from the time of receipt of information that is necessary. The way it works is that we would send out what's known as a request for information, and it's exactly the kind of information you need for a study like this. It's your budget and how many wastewater accounts you have, what your total billing units were, what your capital improvement plan is going to be, what you think your account growth is going to be. And then we get that information, we process it, we put it into our model, and then we would come out and have a meeting with the staff to discuss what our preliminary findings are, make sure the staff kind of buys into what our assumptions are. Because remember, I mean, a forecast is not a guarantee. It's a prediction based on a series of reasonable assumptions. And we all have to agree that the assumptions are reasonable. If you don't think the assumptions are reasonable, you're not going to think the results are reasonable. So if you commission the study in the next 30 days, it'll be done before the end of the year. And the winter time is generally the best time to implement water and or wastewater rate adjustments, because that's generally your low usage months.
And would you at that time give recommendations as if we should go with flat rate or usage rate fees and that kind of thing?
We would present alternatives to you, and our alternatives are what would be known as revenue neutral. We'd give you 2, 3, maybe even 4 different alternatives. Each would get you the same amount of revenue. But you see, the different designs are going to impact different people differently. Let's say you have or keep a flat rate. Everybody pays the same amount for residential. That sounds fair, right? Everybody pays $30 a month for wastewater service. You don't have wastewater meters like you do water meters. You don't have your own water service, so it's hard for you to really figure out how much usage you have. So, hey, it sounds fair, right? Until you start thinking about it and you think, well, if you're a retired couple living alone, you pay the same amount for wastewater service as a family with 5 kids, even though theoretically that family with 5 kids is going to be dumping a lot more sewage into the system than the retired couple. So there are advantages and disadvantages of every rate plan. And so what we would do is we would show you each alternative, the advantages and disadvantages of each. Each would get you the same amount of revenue, and then ultimately it is up to the decision makers of the town to determine what you think would be the best rate plan to go with.
So Dan, as far as your forecast, I mean, how often, let's say that we do proceed with the rate study, how many years does that forecast go out as far as?
Well, our rate model goes out for 10 years.
Okay.
What we typically recommend for a city is that you do somewhere between a 3 and 5 year rate plan, where every year you would do an automatic adjustment. It would be one ordinance, one council vote, and then there would be automatic adjustments in, say, January of each year. Now, whether it's a 3-year or a 5-year sort of depends on, more than anything else, what you anticipate your rate of growth being. If you're a high-growth city, it would be beneficial for you to reevaluate the numbers more frequently, because high-growth cities, you depend more on assumptions about what you think your growth is going to be. If you're a stable city without much growth, it's very easy to project for 5 to 10 years. If you're a high-growth city, it's a little bit more challenging to do so. So sometimes we would recommend a 3-year, sometimes we'd recommend a 5-year. Heck, you could do a 1-year plan if you wanted to. You could reevaluate it every year if you wanted to. But typically a 3 to 5 year plan is what we think is the sort of the sweet spot.
One question. We may be a little unique, but I'm sure you've seen it before, where, as a whole city, we only have one neighborhood that's on sewer.
Right.
So whatever our rates now that are not active to cover those expenses,
Mhm.
the rest of the city is paying for the difference.
That's right.
And we don't own our own water, so we're not getting any revenue from that. Does this process uncover any insight on when it might make sense to look at doing our own water or sewer versus?
This study would not address that specifically, but I certainly have a lot of opinions about that.
Sure.
Particularly for growth cities, if it is reasonably or financially feasible, it's always in your best interest to own your own water supply, because those cities that own their water system control their destiny. Also, generally, particularly if you're getting suburban type residential growth, subdivisions, they expect to be served by the city. They don't expect to be served by a water supply corporation. They don't. In fact, most people in the subdivision probably think they're being served by the city anyway. So if our experience has been, as cities grow, like the cities like Midlothian and other cities that grow more, they acquire their water supply corporations and incorporate them into the city. I think undoubtedly it would be in your best interest to do so. I haven't seen your numbers yet, but and of course a lot of it depends on how much it would cost for you to acquire the system. A good rule of thumb for the acquisition of a water company is that they are generally worth between $2,000 and $3,000 per active connection. So if a water supply corporation has 1,000 connections, that means it's worth about $2 million. So again, it's a rule of thumb, because water supply corporations, it's like buying a car. I have a 2010 Toyota Camry and you have a 2010 Toyota Camry. That doesn't necessarily mean they're worth the same. If mine has 200,000 miles on it and yours has 20,000 miles on it, obviously yours is going to be worth more. So a water supply company, you would have to look at the system, you'd have to hire an engineer to see what kind of shape the system's in. But again, good rule of thumb, if you're kind of trying to figure out what it would cost to acquire a system, that's a very good benchmark to use. Because we've done dozens of water company acquisitions over the years.
I was going to ask, does your company do that as well?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and most of them fall in that sweet spot.
Very helpful.
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. I hope to hear back from you soon.
Thanks, Dan.
And our office is in Plano. Like I said, I live in Frisco, so we're a very, very easy drive out here. Gotten easier with I-30.
So Dan, would you be our point of contact moving forward, or would we be dealing with somebody else once we?
I do all the presentations,
Okay.
so, because I love the sound of my own voice.
Okay.
But I will have a assistant help building the model, but nothing goes out of that office without my looking at it and my approving it. And I do all the presentations,
Okay.
so.
Okay. Thank you.
All the cities know who I am. I do, I've raised the rates for all the cities around here, so I don't get a lot of Christmas cards, but people still do know who I am. All right. Well, thank you very much for your time. I really
Thank you,
appreciate it.
sir.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Appreciate your time.
Okay. Sure, I'd be happy to. There you go.
I'm good.
Thanks again, everybody.
Thank you.
Anybody need water over there?
Yeah, please. Thank you. I like it.
So you open it and it goes.
Interesting.
Yes. And do you want to talk about funding the study or not funding the study? I think after listening to him and learning that he could do it relatively quickly, I think maybe it makes sense, even though I know we're losing money every month, but I kind of think maybe it makes sense to go ahead and do the study first before we touch the rates, so we don't have to touch them again so soon. And that way you've got good justification for whatever we have to raise those rates to. That would just, those are
And the
just my
cost on the
thoughts.
study was what,
It
9,000?
was 9,000. Because we're a small city, he was willing to put a cap on it, so he said he could do it for no more than 9.
Are you going to fund it in 2019 or 2020?
I'd recommend sooner.
So it gets funded in 2019? Does that get funded out of our regular general fund? Or does it get funded out of the sewer fund, the utility fund?
I'll ask Ray, but I think it could be funded out of the utility fund. The PID can't pay for it. But I think out of the utility fund, is that correct, Ray? Is that your thought on it?
That's my thought. No, that's not what we said.
I think I misspoke at the last meeting. I think I misspoke. I was thinking somebody was asking me about did the PID pay for it. So I think I misspoke and said it should come from general, but I believe it should come from utility.
In FY19? So are we keeping then keeping the fee flat then at the current rate for the FY20 budget?
I think maybe Ray just puts in his best estimate for now for the coming year budget, and we can always amend the budget and adjust.
We could move the rate back to 55 and then perhaps target, budget for a rate change mid-year or something. The break-even rate that, we were calculating was almost a 50% increase.
Yeah.
And, does that even make sense that you would want to try to do all that at one time? So that's something to consider. Or you could decide that you're going to leave the rate at 55 for the entire year and then amend. And when you amend, you could amend with a known increase rather than a guesstimate.
Which we'll have by the end of the year.
Right.
Yeah.
End of December 2019.
Right.
I'd feel a lot better setting up a recommendation of a schedule
Based on
based
fact
off, based
versus
off fact than what we don't know.
estimations.
Well, it gives us and it gives the citizens a kind of a timeline of what the next 3 to 5 years may look like. And, you know, it's not just us making this decision. It's somebody that's, you know, looked at other areas, other towns, and, you know, across the country and within Texas that gives us a path that we need to walk. And it, you know, like you said, it's not us raising the rates 50% just on a whim.
It's not really growing. It's not a static thing that it's either.
Right.
It's makes it a little more complicated than
Right.
those years.
Another big thing is what the study does, which is really important, is it doesn't put either this council or any other future councils in the same position where we're looking at this project like this. We could get that 3 to 5 year study, and then when that study expires, see, I don't know if it's going to cost the same, maybe a little less since he has the majority of the data and he's got a history with us. But to be able to keep that going so that way no council has to try to come up with a number. Everything's nice and explained and
If you put a process in place, then it takes the mystery out of it.
yeah.
The only thing I think as a council we're going to have to decide is the 36,000 for the water. Is that something we recoup over time, or is that something we just cut off clean with the 55 cents? Right.
Well, you do have one known, and you know that your treatment costs are going up, what do we say, 14%? So you know, as a sort of middle ground, you could easily come in and say, you know, we've been charging you 55. We've been told by Rockwall that, you know, that portion of the rate's going up 14%, that you might want to have, you do have some justification for doing something.
We said a 10% increase annually, correct? By the North Texas Water District.
All I know is that the documentation that the city of Rockwall provided, the rate was going from 487 to 556
over time.
next year.
And then yeah, it's doubling after that.
So, you know, that's just giving you guys some food for thought about that. You already know that you're, you know, that the moving from the $69 to $55, whatever drove that decision back when it was made.
When was that made again?
Those rates have been in effect for, I guess, this will be the second year.
Okay.
So you could put it back to what they were. It would help a little bit. My only fear with that is that, you know, as soon as he comes back, we're probably going to end up changing it again. So would it be less confusing for people just to keep it the same until we have that report back?
I think what we have to do is do the study, keep the rate the same, and then explain through a public forum, whatever, that we've had the study done, have the gentleman speak to us, and then that will explain to everybody why we had to do the increase.
And again, it's based on his assessment. It's not just
Yes.
the 8 of us going, let's go 85. It's,
Hey Lisa, so what Jim was talking about with that 36K deficit, can you give him that number as well? That way when he rolls the assessment into the rate plans, we have the option there as well.
But it'll be a lot bigger.
About it when we get there, but sure, we can factor that in.
Even if we don't act on it, even if we don't act on it, we at least could have that information. At least on that number.
Yeah, he's already sent me all the documents that he needs to get started on the study. I just, you know, wanted you all to hear it first, and certainly didn't want to give him any kind of go-ahead without talking to him.
The other thing too that makes projecting this really difficult, so the bill we got from Rockwall in May was 4,500 gallons, or 45, whatever, 4.5 million, whatever that is, right? 4,500's the number. Which May was a wet month. And then the bill for July was like 2,900 gallons. That just doesn't make any sense, that how it could be so high in May and then drop in July.
For sewage?
Treatment. So, in all you see, all we see is the bill. It's a one-page bill that says 4,500 times 487, and here's the number. Is there any backup to that we don't see? It just feels like we ought to be able to get a better handle on some sort of proofing out what that usage number is.
Inframark checks it. They check, I guess, at the lift station what goes through versus, the same number to see if relatively close as far as the way Rockwell meters it. And so far, they haven't seen any big inconsistencies. So, it looks like everything's working the way it should. I don't know that there's any rhyme or reason as to why it's up and down like that.
Yeah. Because I can understand somebody maybe, you had a bunch of people filling up pools in May, but that doesn't necessarily relate to sewage treatment.
No. The rain shouldn't relate to sewage treatment unless we have.
And maybe that's it. Maybe it was the rain.
Rain going into the system.
How's our rain getting in the system?
It should.
Runoff?
It should.
A lot of their runoff goes behind my house,
They're,
as far as roads and stuff.
the tap connection should only be made to the house, whoever it's ran through the house
Right.
is supposed to what's going into the tap.
Right.
So the rain shouldn't really change anything.
No.
I don't know. I'm
But
just
it did.
guessing.
Well, I believe the rainwater goes into the retention ponds. And I think what your consultant was talking about was that if you own your water, you're selling it and you have a wet month, you sell less. And a lot of places have, based on your water usage, is how much you get charged for your sewer. So I think he misled you by saying that the rainwater involved.
Thank you.
I think it generally points to the fact we need a rate study.
Yeah.
Well, I can put that rate study for a formal vote on a future agenda. We've already posted the one for tomorrow, but I can get on the 27th, I think is the next meeting.
Okay.
And once a new rate is decided, what's the process to implement?
It's just an ordinance change. It's just, you amend the rate, the fee schedule.
And then the next billing cycle, or does it take a while for the?
That's up to you. You would make an effective date. You would just make an effective date.
Where does the sewer bill show up on Sonoma Verde citizens? How do they get that bill?
Inframark does the billing and sends it to them.
We pay Inframark $55.
We don't have an ability to bill here. We don't have resources for it, so they do the billing for us. It's built into the fee that they get. Well, I can put that on a future agenda then for formal vote.
Yep.
All right.
Okay.
I don't know if it's a percentage or a flat fee, but they do get something for billing.
It's a flat fee of $1,500, then plus a dollar something per connection.
So we're $35 true then, a true number. I mean, we'll get the bill, I think $55 per person. Is that, it's $55 a true number, in other words.
What do you mean by true number?
Well, I was in the, is their billing included in the $55?
Yes.
bill
Yeah.
charge.
And then when you take all that amount, take out the homeowners, and there's a shortfall, and they just, does the city, does Rockwall come to us and say, y'all still owe this much? I don't believe it.
So what happens is Infomart bills the residents $55, and that $55 comes into the city. Then the city pays Infomart for a flat fee for that, plus they also pay Infomart for any maintenance they do. And last week, the representatives from Infomart said that, typically maintenance will run about the same amount as the operating fees. And in this city's case, that's true. Actually, maintenance was a couple of $1,000s more than what the fees were. So when the city gets billed by Infomart, you get basically two bills, one for the flat $1,500 plus the per connection fee, and then any maintenance that they do. So we know what the maintenance part is and what the fee part is. So the city writes a check to Infomart, and then it also writes a check to the city of Rockwall for the treatment. So money is $55 coming in to the city, then the city writes checks out for operations, maintenance, and treatment.
And that should equal the $55 or less, but it's not.
No.
It's not covered.
Well, to my understanding, it equals $69 a person, is that correct?
Right, that's what I was asking.
Well, yeah, the original rate study said it would be 69, and that would leave you a little cushion. But that was before the treatment increases that have come through. So now it's not enough. But what was odd is if you look at what Rockwall sent over, they had an amended rate, and I don't know if their sheet was just backwards or what, but they had an amended rate for 2019 that was less than the adopted rate. Did you notice that?
I did. North Texas does the same thing. They just pass it on.
But it's the adopted rate that Rockwall is billing McLendon-Chisholm.
The 487.
Right. That's what shows up on the bill. Okay, so we're going to move the rate back down to 55, and I'm going to transfer, I have the 9,000 in the general fund, I'm going to move that from the general fund to the utility fund. Those are the first two revisions.
And we're going to fund it in 2019, not 2020.
You're going to fund it this before.
I think we want to do it as soon as possible.
Right.
Okay, so take it out completely, okay.
We'll just amend the revenue for now, and then we can make an adjustment when we know.
Based on the results of the rate study,
Right.
assuming that's the direction.
Okay.
Okay. Do we want to move on to Ray's updated spreadsheet, the one that's in the packet?
Sure.
Can I ask a question? Sure. You're going to move the money from the general into the utility fund to cover the shortage, or the other way around?
That is just about this study.
Okay, I didn't hear what you said about moving the funds.
I had 9,000 in the general fund to do a study next year. I'm just going to take it out because they're going to pay for the study this year.
Okay,
We're just taking it out.
all right, thank you.
Scott, can you just turn your phone off or put the volume off?
I thought I had it all the way down.
Okay, do we want to move to the operating? So if you'll see there that I have a column that is draft number 2, so that is the changes that we talked about last week. I have draft number 1, which is what we originally discussed, and then the last column is the dollar amount change. Okay, so the biggest single item on here that changed was assuming an adopted tax rate of 16.5 cents. That's the single biggest mover out of everything that we talked about.
That's draft 2, correct?
Yeah, so draft 2. And then as far as revenue, that was the only thing that moved. Just going from the rollback rate of 11.9 to an adopted rate of 16.5.
Which is just the highest rate for needed folks for
Yes, you can always back off of it if you decide to, but I have to post, I have to send to the paper tomorrow a maximum rate if we're going to adopt this budget on time.
Do we have to do that today, or we do that tomorrow?
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow. We have to vote the maximum.
Yeah, I need, as
tax
soon as the
rate.
meeting's over, I need to have it kind of all formed out by the end of the day, and I just plug in the numbers
Tomorrow.
tomorrow.
But we don't have to go with the 16.5 rate today, right? I mean, we can make that a different number today if we decide.
Correct, we just need to finalize by tomorrow.
No, I know, I just want to be able to present maybe not 16.5. Because I was just looking, I don't know if we want to talk general or if we want to talk specific, but it seems to me that we've added, what, $51,000 to the budget in expenditures minus this now take away of the $9,000 for the consultant. Or wait, 61,000 we added for the animal control, the disability insurance, the liability, telephone and internet, the consultant, which was the study, correction for financial consulting, engineering, code of ordinances, retirement plan contribution. That all totaled 61,417. Do we, I want to try to articulate this the best I can. I want to see if we can reduce the operating budget by the amount that we're going to increase it, if that makes any sense. So we have a flat budget versus an increased budget. Well, yeah, we bought a bunch of new stuff, but we didn't take anything away. And that's what I wanted to maybe go through line items and see if there's a way that we can save some more money and still fund those things that I just mentioned. Because I see us having to fund the animal control, the insurance, the liability, correcting the financial consulting, code of ordinances, and the retirement plan. I see all those as things that we have to fund. But maybe there's other areas in the general fund that we can reduce some operating expenses, and I just wanted to discuss that.
Okay.
If people wanted to do that. So the first one that I was looking at was the public notice expense, 422. Is there a way to reduce that amount, Lisa?
No. I mean, I only publish what I have to. Most of those are funded by application fees. So if we get a zoning application, we kind of build in that we're going to have to do some advertising. If I end up advertising in the Dallas paper, I tack that onto the bill.
Yeah, I remember you saying that.
As far as what we advertise, I have to do a quarter-page ad about the tax rate and some budgeting. So there are some general ones built in there, but we have to do those by law. There's just
I know, but I saw that it was only $3,500 in 2018 and a big increase in 2019, and I just, that's like a 2/3 increase.
Well, what you don't see, though, is that some of that is going to be offset by what we build out to people. So if one of those Dallas ads for a zoning case, or the PID, for example, that would be paid back to us. So you're seeing what we spent, but you're not necessarily seeing the offset of, what we took in.
Well, where does
to
that
cover
come back? Where is that highlighted in the revenue then?
It would probably just be rolled into, either land use applications, or it's going to be a reimbursement from the bid.
In 2018, the 3,500, that would have been true back then too, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Those are line items.
Sonoma itself, I think that ad was about 1,000. We had another case that was about 1,000. But those would have been reimbursed to us.
So in that situation, the application fees and what we're having to pay out, are we breaking even in that situation, or was it costing the city money out of our own pockets minus that application fee?
No, they would have paid us back for, it would have been included, the application fee would cover the notice.
Okay.
Or if it was, say, PID related, I would charge it to the PID and we would get reimbursed eventually for it,
Okay.
if that makes sense. But we do occasionally have, if we have an ordinance and it has we adopt a new ordinance and it has a penalty, I have to publish the ordinance caption, the little top part of the ordinance. So it depends on how active we are as a council, a city, with what we have to publish or not. The budget stuff, there's always a couple of ads that we have to put out there for the budget.
So so out of this 10,950 that we have on there, if some of that is going to be PID related, then it should not be online for 22. Because it'll go straight to the PID and shouldn't be reflected in the general fund.
So does that mean we can reduce that amount?
If we had an idea, at least if you had an idea.
It was approximately 1,000, the last one I saw. So I can get you that number.
I'm just trying to, even if we nickel and dime, we could
The money,
potentially-
the money that we received from the PID, the bond issuance, that would have been one of the things that
That offset
covered it.
that.
Exactly.
Right.
So one of the lines, was it 42, Ray? 42,000 that we?
Yeah.
42.5?
So this number, again, this number may be too high because part of that number that we incurred was for the bonds. Because you had how many public notices on those?
I think one, I don't know if it was one or two.
Which you would not have this year.
So could you look at that as a potential place to take a reduction?
But if you look at what we took in, so we had an extra 42,500 for revenue that came from PID. That's part of some of the things that they covered, like for an admin fee. That would pay us back there. It's more than paid us back. But they assumed that we had some expenses for, administrative time spent on the PID, phone calls and conferences and back and forth for 6 months, and also a couple of those advertising fees. So that 42.5 would have covered any ads that were in there.
So going from this year to next year, we wouldn't have
We
that
shouldn't,
activity.
no,
So we
you
can
could
look at
probably cut 1,500 or so.
We can look at that 10,950 to determine how much of that was related to what you had to do for the PID and back that number out, if it's 2,000 or whatever.
Yeah, I don't think it was more than 2,000. It might be up to 2,000.
But gosh, 2,000, that funds the disability insurance right there.
The biggest notice that we saw between years prior and this year we're in is the charges from the Dallas Morning News. They're huge.
We try not to use them if it's possible, but sometimes the way the timing works, it's just hard to avoid.
Okay, so
That big of a jump, more people than normal. It's just a,
yeah,
I mean, you get to, looks like the old number was good for a while, 3,500.
yeah, and that was always the Herald banner.
Yeah.
And now the new thing in the mix is the Dallas Morning News. Some of that was related to the bonds.
Right.
That will not repeat, so that portion you could reduce.
So we could take it out.
Take some of that out, yeah.
Okay. The next one I had a question on was line 520, unless someone had a question on something between 422 and 520. I don't want to jump ahead of anybody.
Well, 512, we caught that trash was being
Yes,
done twice.
yes,
That got corrected?
yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Okay, yeah, I see
on
the
the
question.
520 telephone and internet, the $1,400, I thought we were going to procure those phones in FY19.
Right. That's what we discussed.
Okay.
So this would not be an ad.
But in the 1,400, the annual service, the
That
phones,
is correct.
Purchase of the phones, wasn't it?
no, the phones were,
The phones
the
were
total is
6
$2 grand.
total.
The 1,400 is the annual.
It's just the monthly fee,
Okay.
so that would have to stay.
Okay.
I mean, it's that much for the year, so you, yeah, break it down, divide it by 12. Mhm.
Okay. Next one was the postage. I know we talked about that a little bit, but what do we spend our postage on? Is that including surveys, et cetera?
Yes.
So how much postage was spent on the survey last year?
I'd have to go back and look, but probably around 1,500 or so.
So can we cut that expense in half? What happens to your budget if you only have 1,500 for postage?
I'd be comfortable with it if you're not going to do a survey. What line is it?
It's line number 626.
Leave it at 2,000.
Well, why don't we just go back and look and see what that was and pull that out?
I'll go pull it out and I can let him know and we can adjust if that's all
Thank you.
right.
Yes,
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just wanted to make sure we didn't have a separate line for the survey. We didn't
No.
do a separate line, did we? It wasn't a separate, okay.
No.
I'll pull it out then and send it to you.
Okay, then 63004, we're moving out of the budget. I have 63008, financial consulting. I'm not sure what that is. $5,000 correction?
Yeah, that was an input error, so,
Okay.
yeah, but what that is that would be things that we do that aren't part of our fixed fee, the accounting and payroll services. So if we do something like participate in a rate study or things of that nature, that comes in there. Then there's some other outside things that in the years past, that would be, as an example, this rate study or things that have come along in the past and the reason that I corrected it is because what we were trying to do was keep the number from the prior year and then just roll it over. But that again, that was just staying with the pattern that we were doing. There's no reason to say that it would be that much or less. It was just how we were preparing the budget. This is what we had the prior year. We'll take the same number and, round it up to the next even number.
And where was that previous years? When we didn't forecast for it.
It was all rolled up, like if it was rolled up into the accounting and payroll services or all of that stuff, it was all rolled up into one,
So this is just broken out.
just broken out.
Thank you. And 63009, engineering, 15,000. I don't remember what that was for.
That was one of the discussion items last week about adding that.
The city does usually have a few costs that we have to consult with the engineer on that's not related to an application. So maybe we have a drainage issue in town and we need somebody to evaluate it. This year, if we end up platting property that we own for fire station or something like that, we had a little bit of work done on that in the past, but we'll have to finish it up and we may have to consult with the engineer on that. So I expect that we will have, it's not going to be a zero cost. We are going to have some costs associated with the engineer.
Do you think that 15's enough? Or is
I
it
don't
too
know
much?
if it's enough, to be honest. I don't have a good estimate for that. That's just my best guess. I know those plating fees last year, I want to say they were around 5 or so. Is what we expected it to be.
And that's something tax staff would pay for, right? If it's specific to the station.
I mean, we would be getting the
We
money.
would get the money back for it. We would get the money back for it. We haven't, they haven't determined how they're going to pay us yet.
Right.
So we're kind of waiting to see, are we going to get one big check or are we going to get checks as we go along the way? We just don't know yet. But, okay, you know, drainage issues are kind of probably number one thing that we spend money with the city engineer on is I'll get 2 subdivisions that are kind of going at each other because one says water's draining off their property onto another one and whose fault is it? And eventually they have to take care of the problem, but sometimes we just sort of need somebody to come in and step in and say, it's your problem, or it's maybe another subdivision's problem, or something wasn't done right, we need to get an engineer who did the subdivision to change something.
So how have you paid for it in the past?
We just pay for it.
It wasn't last year.
But how?
So
Where?
it would be all the engineering fees, so that it was sort of decided that, well, engineering was really a function of development. So going back, I believe it was year before last, years prior to year before last, engineering was always broken out in this section where it was broken out this time. Then basically making the decision that engineering was part of development, then your development income, which is up in the revenue section, engineering has been netted against that,
The plat fees.
against the plat fees. But if something rolled through that was non-plat fee related and that engineering bill did not break itself out to where we knew that it was not plat fee related, then it got netted. So it was a net number that's been presented this year and the year before. So does that make sense? So it's a revenue and an expense item netted together. And what Lisa's wanting to do is to not do that, but to take the true administrative component of the engineering and show that as a separate line item. So that's why that number's down there. It's not that the city hasn't been incurring those types of costs. It's just that it's been netted against development revenue in this particular year and the year before.
But what I do is when I get, say, city engineer bills, invoices from city planner, even if the attorney touches something related to development, I have to have them review it. I then have little spreadsheets for all the development projects, and I pull, if something's for, say, Sonoma Verde 2, I'll take the planner's bill, the engineer fee, and I'll apply it towards this. So if they've given us a deposit, we kind of run it down, and eventually they'll have to kind of fill it back up again. So, but we pull out what they can pay for it, but every now and then there's just something on there that we eat the cost for. And I've become a little bit more, I think Dave was a little bit more liberal than I was. I've become kind of strict about when these subdivisions call, especially if they're older subdivisions, and tell me that they have a drainage problem or a problem. And I've been kind of asking the engineer to do like an initial evaluation, but to let it go pretty quickly and say, okay, this is what I see and this is what I think we need to do to get someone to solve it. But unless that subdivision is new, they need to start, picking up the tab for most of that. So I can kind of see stepping in and initially just having a look at it just to see what the obvious problem is.
Just see if you can help.
Right.
in a way.
But we've kind of thrown it back onto them this past year, telling them, HOAs, your subdivision's been there for 20 years. So it's going to be between your subdivision and this subdivision to work that out. But sometimes we kind of just sort of need to get the ball rolling a little bit to kind of see what direction to push it. So we will have a few minimal fees for engineering. And the 15 may be over, it may be a little under. It's just really hard to determine. So that was just my best estimate.
Okay. number 700, capital expenditures, public safety, that 15,000, is that duplicated?
I moved it out, if you'll notice, up in the public safety line, up above on 430.
Yeah.
I had it in there in that overall number, just so that we could see the impact of,
I see it, okay, got it.
But then, but normally we show public or capital expenditures on separate line items.
Okay,
So I took it out of there and moved it down just for presentation purposes.
okay. So the surplus, this is probably getting into a policy discussion, the 224,000 in the projected FY19 surplus. How would we be able to take a portion of that surplus to help set up our reserves?
Absolutely.
And how much would you recommend that we do that? I don't want to leave, no wiggle room as far as, issues that come up like an MC50 or something like that, that we have the money to pay for it. What's our authority to move money from a reserve fund to an operating fund?
Okay, so right now you don't have anything
Yeah.
appropriated.
Right.
So you can do whatever you,
But say we have a public safety reserve fund and a
capital improvement.
capital improvement or a public road, not roads, it's not the word, but, kind of like public road, public works. So can you move money from the public works reserve to the operating fund if we come up with an issue that we need to fix a road issue?
I think that's where you have a fund balance policy. And I can bring that to you. I was just kind of waiting for you all to decide how you want it, what direction you want it to go on that. But that's where we'd have a formal policy that said you've got some assigned reserves or unassigned reserves, and, at what point was it appropriate to use them? And how, what steps need to be taken to use them.
I mean, can we at this budget workshop decide that we want to have reserve funds in specific categories and allocate funds to it for this budget?
I think you could tell me what you want to do, and then I can come up with a fund balance policy, and you can vote on that formally.
For the budget, for this
Mhm.
FY20? What do you guys think about that? Setting aside, taking out funds from the surplus and creating reserve funds defined as public works, public safety, and capital improvement. And then establishing a fund balance policy so that we would have the authority to use those reserve funds in the general fund budget.
Yeah, and the fund balance,
Having a reserve fund equaling the annual, a year-long budget.
to grow it to a level over time.
We can't do it all this year, but
And you would have a
get a
goal that it would
start.
be a particular minimum. We're not going to reach it the first year, but that it would grow.
Would we talk about like 4 or 5 years timetable? Right.
But we do have the surplus that we can start with.
You can. And then usually you'd want to make sure that whatever tax rate you adopt, if we are building, that it's going to, however fast you want it to grow is covered in there too.
Right, and I think what I've been wrestling with all week is we have a rollback rate of 12 cents. So whatever we increase our tax rate, so say we go to 16.5 cents, we have to be able to say exactly what we purchased with the difference between that 12 cents and the 16.5 cents. And by saying we're going to do a little bit here, a little bit there, or whatever. I think we need to be more definitive so that the public knows exactly why we raise their taxes, because we will be raising their taxes.
And you can, a lot of cities, when they do their budget, rather than just a spreadsheet, will include some demographic information about the city and some background information. And then in the back of it, they may have their financial policies kind of attached to it. And it also, sometimes there's a sheet in there that sort of says the budget process and how you've come to these numbers. So we can include that kind of in the final package.
I mean, I think the simpler
Before we
we
adopt
keep
it
it, the
formally.
better. You know, we took money away from the general fund preliminary budget. We decreased in certain areas because we wanted to fund animal control. We wanted to fund code of ordinances. We wanted to fund financial da-da-da-da-da. And then we took the surplus of $200 and some thousand and cut that surplus down to $75,000 and moved that money into the reserve account. And I think the clearer that we are, the easier it'll be for the public to understand.
We can do that in a little letter that's kind of in front of the budget.
Because I think if we're going to raise it up to 16 and a half, we have to say exactly what we want with that money. I mean, I'm not sure, I'm not ready to go that high, but I'm not ready to go that high, but
So whatever we come up with.
we still have to justify
It's
it.
not just one line, but.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So, are you finished with your questions? I just have one thought on the income side. And I'm definitely a proponent of being conservative on income and aggressive on expenses. But this year, we know we've been disappointed with our building permits. It's come in slower than we thought. We also know that next year, phase 2 is coming online, right? I mean,
Right.
Yet we're not recognizing any upside. And I just, like I said, I get it, be conservative and aggressive, but I think we're being really conservative. And actually projecting $1,000 less income for 2000 next year than this one year.
Yeah, we had a disappointing year this year.
Yeah. And we're still at 3.
So the question would be, even though phase 2 is coming online, is the construction rate going to go up simply because you have, in other words, another way to look at it would be, what was the construction rate hindered by the running out of lots in phase 1? Or were there ample lots in phase 1, and just because there are more lots coming on in phase 2, could you extrapolate that you can build more faster?
Yeah.
If they were running out of lots in phase 1 coming up to the end of this, then that would support the fact that, well, they didn't build as much as they could. But if they were building as much as they could, then just because you're opening up more doesn't necessarily mean they're going to build more or build faster. However, the other thing to consider, though, is the fact that mortgage rates are dropping.
Right, I was just going to say that.
So then you might be able to say that because mortgages looks like they're going to be easier to obtain, that the rate will go up because you were fighting mortgage rate increases for the better part of the fiscal year. And now you're not going to be. You're going to see them drop. And they've already dropped. And home buying, existing home sales, are moving back up. I don't know how the economics of those builders, mentally, how they think about that. Because they've probably already decided to some degree how quick they're going to build, no matter what. And that's why I was hoping that we could get input from them about, well, we're projecting we're going to do more or the same or less.
When I talked to the building official, and he kind of told me it was just really impossible. There's so many variables out there. I think we're going to do better than this year, but by how much, it's just kind of anyone's guess. David Ellis, our North Texas inspections person. I mean, he's got direct contact with them.
Those companies have projections.
I don't think,
You know,
I would think they do.
I mean, even if they didn't want to let us in on, the final curtain, just say, yes, it will be an increase over last year.
Well, I suspect it will be an increase. It's just how conservative or optimistic we want to be with the number.
Yeah. It's something to address, and it's possible.
Let me go back and address sort of what you were looking at when you're looking at that surplus or that projected surplus.
Yes.
So that surplus, if you didn't have the $42,000, which is a one-time event for the administration fee,
Yeah.
and you didn't have the grant, you would have been in a deficit this year. Because there's a one-time 42 and there's a 252 that you know has a limited life. So even though that surplus is, showing up there, that would not have been had those two events not occurred. Okay. The other thing too, that when you're talking about your fund balance policy, there is a non-cash related item. This is all pretty much predicated on cash flow. There's a non-cash related item that's not on here, and that's depreciation. So depreciation is going to be about another $300,000. It doesn't affect the money in the bank, but it affects your fund balance. Fund balance is not cash in the bank. So when and all I'm simply saying is that as you're contemplating building these appropriated amounts, the wording needs to be such that you're trying to keep cash available, not necessarily your fund balance. Because fund balance is not the same thing. It's not cash in the bank. So as you work on that, I can certainly help you. It's, you want to appropriate, not fund balance, but appropriated funds.
So a percentage of
Operating expenditures or something of that nature that you're trying to get to.
Where you're saying my whole idea is not a good way to looking at it,
No, I think that based on the experience we've had, in my career, just like the example that in some of the papers that Lisa gave you, one of the people providing an example was the city of Webster, which is outside of Houston. Well, way back early in my career, we consulted with that city about this very issue. And they basically wanted funds in reserve, not a percent of the fund balance. Because fund balance means like operating fund, utility fund, interest and seeking fund, that terminology fund. When we're talking about appropriated funds, we're talking about dollars. The fund definition in dollars, not the fund definition as it relates to a municipal accounting fund. You see the distinction that I'm making? So, they wanted basically cash in the bank to be a certain percent of their operating budget year over year over year. And if they fell below that, then they would have a line item on the budget to increase the appropriated cash balance. Let's use that as a better way of saying it, appropriated cash balance. They wanted to get that cash balance built up so that it stayed at a certain level. And then economically, whatever would happen, they would either move part of the cash surplus over as a revenue item in 1 year because they had a better year and there was excess cash. Therefore, we said we don't have to go with this year's revenue to meet all of our expenditures. We can move cash over. So that's really what you're trying to get to, right, Lisa? You're trying to say that we want to have, appropriated cash that would serve to protect the city against either an economic downturn or whatever the case may be. Infrastructure improvement, whatever you guys decide that's important. So,
I think you could also designate reserve or whatever you want to call it for, say, a new fire truck that may go out on us in 3 or 4 years. A replacement fund, in addition to the fund balance that would be kind of unassigned, just a percentage-wise of the budget. You have maybe something in addition to that was specific to building up funds for a later purchase that is going to come down the road.
Would that be like capital equipment replacement?
And the thought process on that is no different than what this gentleman was talking about as far as setting your sewer rates. The idea is that down the road you're going to have to replace X, Y, and Z, and that you don't want to try to bump up your tax rate in the year that you need to replace it. Just like you don't want to come up and increase your sewer rates by 50% to get to a break even today. You start building to that. And so like what a lot of cities do is they will look at their annual depreciation of their fixed assets and say that we want to keep a repair replace fund equal to 25% of what our accumulated depreciation is, or some number, so that there is cash available to buy the new fire truck or to pay for a big capital repair or something of that nature. So it would be very, very helpful as you're looking at trying to establish a rate. And you may not be able to get there this year. You may be uncomfortable to say that you're going to get to 16.5 cents. But the idea is that no different than doing the sewer rate study, you have to have a study that says, based on what we have today, what we own today, fire trucks, and these types of things, we plan on replacing those at these points down the road.
Reese, do you know if Chief has done that? Of course, he's not here to ask him that question.
Yes, actually, he has worked on that, and I believe he has a handout here someplace.
Some stuff is very difficult to know exactly in years.
Yeah, you have rules that you have to follow.
But it's just things like that.
Right.
On that appreciation, we're not doing it.
Yeah, you're not funding depreciation on anything at all today.
Didn't mean to rifle through your things, but
And you know that your depreciation is about $300,000 a year. Now, some of that is on big, long life items like the roads or the sewer lines or the water lines or those kinds of things. Those have long lives, and therefore your rate, your ability to fund those would also be spread out over a long period of time. But, a fire engine, I think it's a 10-year life or something like that. So you could look down the road and you know that if we have 3 engines, maybe one engine's going to have to be replaced in year 4. The next engine is going to have to be replaced in year 7, and the third engine is going to have to be replaced in year 10. And those are significant ticket items. You want to be able to have the cash on hand. And if you're funding those reserves as you go, then they don't hit the budget all in one year when you replace them. So that's the thought process behind that. But right now the city has cash in the bank. It has built some reserve. So it's not
Built surplus, right?
It's built surplus, but it also has cash reserves. So it has a fund surplus. In other words, its assets are more than its liabilities. But it also has cash in the bank. So it's liquid. And so in looking at where you're headed, you know that without the without the bond administration fee that the city had, and the grant, the SAFER grant, you would not have really per se added any cash to the bucket this year. You did because of those things. Without those, you wouldn't have. So in your thinking, you have to say, do I want to start planning today for the fact when I don't have those?
2 years, right.
2 years down the road, do I want to start building to that? And again, this is just budgeting methodology that I'm describing. It's not any type of recommendation. It's just methodically building towards something that you know that you're going to, just like if you were planning on buying a car for your family and you didn't want to finance it, then you know that you need to have so many dollars in your savings account to go buy that car. And so it's appropriating the cash for future use. So if you're always at a break-even or negative budget when it comes to revenue versus expense, that cash will never increase. So the question is it if we stay steady, in other words, do we have to increase it or do we need to increase it? You just simply know that right now you would not be steadily increasing your tax reserves without doing something, either relying on valuation increases to whatever extent they're going to help you, or moving the rate slightly higher to build toward that.
So I can bring you, the agenda's already out there for tomorrow, but I can bring you a fund balance policy at the end of the month and take into consideration where do we think we're going to be on revenue this next year. And we can kind of build in some numbers for what you'd like to see for a minimum fund balance, knowing that it's going to take us a little while to meet those minimums. I don't know if you're ready to go there or not, but Jim did prepare kind of a little outline of the fire major assets that we have as far as vehicles, and a little bit about the timeline for what he thinks might be the life expectancy, and the first major purchase that he thinks will probably need to happen. And what year was that? Was that 21 or 22?
I know last week it asked kind of what we're expected to spend here in the near future. So a couple of the big expense items of capital improvements that we talked about, or one that we talked about would be replacing the E1 that was purchased last year. It's a 2004. It's currently 15 years of age. When it hits the 20 years of age, there's really no credit to us whatsoever. So that means we can still use that apparatus, but the vehicle, we get no credit when it comes to ISO or anything like that. So we lose credit for that. So here you see I was looking out 2021 start the bid specs out of it, with possibly purchasing it 21, 22. And I know Ms. Skip, you had asked about putting something together to kind of give you an idea. And this is based on an aerial device. Okay? Now we would sit down and do an assessment, needs assessment to see if we get ready to purchase a replacement vehicle, whether it's an engine or not, will we go ahead and look at the cost of replacing it with a Quint capable vehicle.
It's a Quint.
Ladder truck, it has multiple capabilities. It has abilities of pumping water, carrying hose, and it also has ladder capabilities, aerial device.
Fire engine, fire exit.
It's
Big ladder on the top.
yeah,
All
combined into one truck. Ladder and a tiller truck. So a true ladder truck is ladders. Doesn't carry water, doesn't carry anything, it just carries boilers from rescue time to put tools that's it.
We went through the zoning ordinance today, and we looked, and it looks like
That's at the bottom there.
the maximum height in McLendon-Chisholm for residential is like 45 feet, and we just don't have anything that's going to get to that level.
And so that's why the information there, when you ask what vehicle we look at replacing, that's the first one I know in our next 5 years that we need to replace engine 1, which is the 2041. And one of the reasons I started looking at the Quint concept or ladder concept is because of what Lisa just said. I was curious, and we looked at ordinance, I'm like, everything's 45.9. And we do have some throughout the city that are tall, that we do have to rely on those cities to be able to bring a ladder truck to us, which they will.
But that costs between 700 and $1 million.
Roughly, yes, ma'am. And now that's today's prices.
When you look at that being a customer spec, not just buying, well,
Either
tag on some other cities.
tag on to some, whatever would be the cheapest way for us to be able to achieve a vehicle we know that will last us another 20 years. If New York's running another bid again, and we can piggyback off of that, copy what they do, it saves us a lot of money, which we did, or I did with another agency in years past, was piggyback with other stuff.
Are there grants out there to purchase fire trucks?
There are grants through the Forestry Service when it comes to aerial apparatus. I don't know of any off the top of my head that would help us.
Mostly for brush trucks.
Brush trucks and tankers and things like that, or a combination of a tanker, which is always important too.
And you could always finance it when you get to that point, but it would be nice if we didn't have to finance, or at least not finance all of it.
And that helps give you an idea of when you start talking about these funds. These are some
I mean, it's the cost of your whole budget. I mean, it's more than your annual budget for one truck. So I can't see why we would, I don't know how we would be able to buy it outright. I can't see where we would have to.
You wouldn't unless you had the funds available. It would be similar to what we did when we purchased the 3 apparatus that we have now. We call them lease programs. Get the same thing. Yes. And then you see down there in the yellow, our 10-year life expectancy. We bought 15 sets last year. So we were looking at replacing at least half of those. Not that the gear's out of date, you can't use it.
Right.
But looking to go ahead and get 7 sets in, that way when that 10-year mark hits, we're not buying another 15 sets right off the bat. So we kind of offset the replacement of a bunch of your protective equipment.
Now, like you said, it's all.
Right now, the full-time staff has 2 sets. Everybody else part-time volunteer has 1 set. We jumped a little bit ahead of the game when it comes to sets of gear that they're required to have. That's not been put into play yet. We know it's coming.
Well, some of them came with beer, didn't they?
No, ma'am.
No.
No, ma'am. Those are the 2 that I call big ticket items that I can see us purchasing over the next couple of years. The other vehicles, key thing is you see on there, and this was just kind of a brief. As the city grows, we're more or less right now kind of as needed if it comes to purchasing vehicles versus sitting out and saying every 10 years we're going to replace an engine. We're not there yet. But that's what this brief was set up for, to kind of give you an idea of what we need to do and what I would look at when it comes to replacing these vehicles. Wear and tear, mileage, service hours, call volume, size of district roads, or safety considerations, because the vehicle's just gotten to the point where it's not safe to have it on the street. And then, obviously the age of the vehicle. But this would give you kind of an idea. I put down here anticipated replacement, kind of something I put out there what it'll look like in the future as we move along. Engines, replacing one every 10 years, basically it's a 20-year lifespan. Brush trucks, cans, special vehicles, and staff command vehicles. Yes.
Thank you for doing that.
Most of them are best guess. It's anybody, you research and look it up when it comes to the replacement of these. We could go out tomorrow or tonight and have an incident and have to replace a vehicle overnight. I know neighboring agency has gone through that with certain vehicles, and where they've had to, now they're down vehicles and they've got to replace them. So
Well, anytime you're on the road, there's the potential for a vehicle being damaged. I've seen multiple fire engines, and they're the biggest of the group, get hit. Yeah.
So Chief, based on this bad news, is there anywhere you can cut the budget in FY20 to help with that? I mean, I was looking at some things, and I know we talked about it already, but the one I'm really wondering if you can reduce is 43004, the maintenance repair of the station, since we're going to be closing that station anyway. Can we drop
We
that?
don't know when we're going to be building that station, so that's one thing we're having to follow through sheets.
43004, maintenance and repair. And I know it's, in your submission, it was called maintenance and operations.
Yes, ma'am.
So I understand that, but it was projected to only be 7,000 this past year. And I know you did all the enhancements to the building with the 7,000, so would it be possible to keep it at the 7,000 rate?
We might be able to trim 1,002 off of it. This number was based on a 15% increase based on my expenditures this year. So I have a spreadsheet of everything that I've spent to date. Now, it hasn't been updated over the last month because this was done about a month and a half ago to get ready for a budget talk.
Sure.
And so I've added that 15%. So at 12,000, we're right there. We don't have a whole lot of cushion in there.
But that 15% is based on an exceptional year expenditures.
Right. So I mean, we've got a new septic in play. We do have to still maintain that and bump that out every couple of months. So that's an expense. We've had a couple issues with AC. We're band-aiding some of this stuff as long as we can. Where we don't replace it right now because we do know that we have this new station that's going to come on board. We just don't know when. But I can go back and I can cut it down to the, we might be able to knock another $1,000 off of it, maybe $2,000 at the most. But I have to go back through and kind of get some more accurate numbers based on this last month's expenditures and what I project over the next couple of months till October or September. So
I agree, this in the year, it's seen the most expenditures by far.
This was
the new
it.
standard and then marked out.
The 7,000 was, we didn't know. Remember, I didn't have a fire station, didn't have expenses, wasn't sure of their expenses at the time. So now we have a whole lot, we have a better idea of what it would cost us to maintain those two stations.
But these aren't maintenance systems.
This is maintenance and operation.
But the 7,000 was.
That was just a number we put in there to hopefully, that we put in there for maintenance of the station last year.
So that does not include.
That doesn't include the replacement the previous council gave us for remodel. That's separate. That was completely separate.
That's right. So, 25.
I think we could pull streetlights out of public safety and make it its own line.
I'm sorry, Lisa?
Do you think we could pull streetlights out of public safety and just kind of make it its own line?
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. Is that not a public works type function?
Maybe we could put street repairs and streetlights kind of together and pull it out of public safety.
You mean, in other words,
I mean, I'm not talking about the amount itself, I'm just talking about just organization of the budget.
The category?
and where are you suggesting it would go?
Well, we've got street repairs and street, I don't know if you wanted to call it public works, we don't really have anything labeled that, but I don't really have a preference, I just thought it would be cleaner to pull it out of public safety since all of that is fire.
Well, that line item can be pulled out of there, and then the only other place you have to put it is just its own line item in the general fund, not in there. We certainly do that.
That works.
Okay.
Okay, for 518 janitorial, you're only spending $552 in 2019, but you're asking for $2,700 for 2020. What's the impact if we put that at 1,000? Chief?
Janitorial line item.
I don't think-
this is city.
That's not, that's under city.
That's not.
It's under the public safety budget, though. 518 janitorial.
I'm not sure of that number.
I figured,
We already cleaned.
so is this something that can be,
Maybe,
deleted.
Well, let me give you a second.
Let's make sure we have it in the other part of the
Yeah,
budget.
that's what I'm looking,
Maybe, since we do have City Hall cleaned and
because I don't see it under general and administrative
we
expenditures.
just had the windows done. Did anybody know?
It's for,
I just got here now.
Then you have janitorial, it's 4,200.
yeah, but you took, there's nothing in the budget though for janitorial for the general fund,
It's in maintenance.
building maintenance.
Yeah.
So then that means we could save $2,700.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the 552 previously and then the 27, I'm not.
Let's see, I can,
Yeah,
let me get,
look it up.
I'll make it going here and I can tell you what's hitting.
That's good catch.
I told you I had no life this weekend.
Yeah.
We're paying one of the volunteer firefighters something for that. No.
Station 2.
Mm-hmm.
But I usually, I take all that out of, and now, again, we didn't have line items broken down this year, but normally that would come out of station maintenance and operations. Where I would write it on invoice that comes in, that's where I write it to. So they may have broken it down even more.
So do you want to check on that to see how much you're actually spending on lawn maintenance? To see if it really is? $840 this year up to $1,400?
The number that I have in there included that maintenance as well when it comes along. So I had included in the 12,000 here that you were asking about when it comes to
So
maintenance. and
that could
operations.
be a thing we can delete too.
I think so. I'm comfortable with it. So that I had it included in mine from the beginning. I usually,
Okay.
So you want to take that out?
yes, sir.
Okay.
Which one is that?
The 1,400.
1400.
Janitor will wait to find out if it's yours or not.
I think we had another line for that.
Yeah, there was another line.
For janitorial services.
All right,
at
so
the
we
station.
can take out the 2,700?
Yeah, unless Ray's looking that up now to see exactly what that is. If
Potential, yeah.
potentially, yes.
So in year 12, you have the lawn maintenance in there, so I double dipped when I broke it out. Is that what you're, on the, year 12 included lawn maintenance?
I had it in the
Okay,
maintenance and operation, yes, sir.
okay,
I included all in one line item.
So we don't need a separate one for
No,
that?
no, ma'am.
All right.
okay.
And then janitorial may be the same thing. If expenses that we purchase, training paper for, or cleaning supplies, but, I don't know what that 27.
And then for trash pickup, we have the same amount of money for trash pickup for the general fund that we do for the public safety fund. Both at 1344.
It's taken out there.
I took it out.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Okay. And then telephone and internet, would that be able to be flatlined to what it was for FY 2019? Down to the, just down to like 2,000?
I don't know if that's what we currently show for telephone and internet expenses.
It's 1864.
Let's see why we couldn't bring that down to just an even 2,000. Again, that number I had figured into operation maintenance.
So we should take it out then?
I would say we would take it out. That's what I calculated into my budget when I had the $12,000, included all those items.
That's
Station
good.
maintenance and operations.
That's good.
So telephone,
Or we could recategorize it. Yeah, you
Take
could
it off of the.
take it off of your 12,000 and highlight it in those subcategories.
Just break it out.
So you take it away from the 12,000 and put it.
Yeah.
Itemize that line number.
Yeah, because you're itemizing the line number. That's a good point, Trudy.
So we're going to do lawn maintenance and janitorial.
And telephone and internet.
Something about
I don't know if janitorial, yeah, that,
that looks like it did the same thing there.
Jim's getting from, okay.
Yeah. On telephone and internet,
You'll keep that, yeah.
2,000.
We'll make that even 2,000 now.
we're getting a bill from Sudden Link that,
We've got different services down there.
We do, yes. Yeah.
that's your internet, right?
We do, yes.
Yeah.
Different services.
So that has to stay because that's coming straight off of that.
And that 2280 that you went ahead and figured in risk to finish up the year.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so then we're going to reduce line 43004 by the amount that,
Yeah, by 2,000.
by 5, yeah, those other three we just mentioned.
Except for the janitorial.
Oh, except for Ken.
Except for janitorial.
So lawn maintenance and janitorial are in your 12. And then, just to make it easier on you, Chief, we can go into next year and just book those to that
That line item?
line item
Okay.
where it makes sense to you.
Okay. I don't know, yeah, no, we didn't have a line for janitorial unless it's, well, yeah, that's not supplies, that's a lot of supplies between.
A lot of TP.
Well, 43000.
That's
Yeah.
a possibility for that
Yep.
part.
No, but gear and supplies is already in
We
43005.
just take those line items and put them into
Hey, Chief,
43004.
are those supplies pulled out of 43005?
No, that would be separate. That would be minor tools and equipment and all that. That would be
Okay.
a separate line item. I have a different line item that I call it mine, and they combined a couple of items together to make it gear and supplies.
Yeah, that's for like uniforms,
Yeah.
badges,
Yes,
tools,
That's the only line
medical
item.
supplies.
Yes,
That's just the only line item I see with the supplies.
43004, what is our, what do we take out of that? How much is it now?
Roughly 8. It's roughly 8,000 now because we're taking out
No, it's going to stay 12. We're taking out,
lawn maintenance and
we're
janitorial, right?
taking, yeah, we're removing those line items and zeroing those out and leaving the
Do what?
43004 where it's at.
Oh, we're not going to re-itemize it?
We had talked about re-itemizing
Re-itemizing.
it
So we
and
just-
reducing.
So take those and just put them under the
Oh, okay,
maintenance
Yeah.
for.
okay.
So we're still going to keep the,
Itemized part of it, just leave it.
yeah.
What you got?
We're going to take it out of the 12,000.
Yes, sir.
You've discovered that you had a lot of this stuff included in your 12,000. Water and electricity, did you double, was that part of your 12,000 or did you
A lot of
budget
that
that
was,
separately?
a lot of that was in my $12,000 figure, the bills that we paid out for water and electricity. All that
So
was
those
figured out.
items also should
Should be broke out.
12,000 should be reduced also.
Yeah.
But they're really,
Not that how much of that 12,000 left.
I would have, maybe you should reduce to 12 and keep the operation stuff separate. I mean, the numbers wouldn't change, just for clarity.
Any redundancy would take us off the office.
So any operation, any expenses we have for the station, any supplies, things like that, any repairs that we've got to make, and that includes Station 1 and Station 2. That's two buildings. All that's included in station maintenance and operations, paying for the electric bill, paying for the internet. things like
Yeah,
that.
so all you need to do then is
Subtract the-
scrub that out.
Subtract your operations
Yeah.
amounts from the maintenance.
Yeah, you're talking about the amount of time.
Talking about 3975?
Take them out of the 12 and just keep them in
Just
operation.
keep it in operations, yep.
Okay, and another question on 60601 staff salaries. That increased by $24,000. Do you know, could you explain that? From the 6.5% increase?
Hold on a minute.
Part of that is that the actual year was only about 10 months. All the guys didn't come on. They weren't there for the entire year.
Yeah, the entire fiscal year.
Yeah.
Were any raises
No.
factored in there?
No increases.
Okay.
Did you put,
The other
did you
thing too,
factor in a
Ms. Tippett,
possible
is that
code?
now we really understand the impact of how the overtime is working. And so they weren't hitting their full shifts when they first came on. And now they're all in full shift mode, so that 2 out of every 3, they're hitting their 120-hour, 2-week shift. 14 of those hours are overtime. And they weren't ramped up that way at the beginning of the year.
Got it.
Does that include a code enforcement in there, in the staff salaries, or did we pull that out?
Code enforcement is $6,500, and it's in the general fund salaries.
And I believe one of my last questions is for the health insurance expense. That's an increase as well over 2019. The rationale for that? It went from 31 up to 38.
They didn't they didn't hit health insurance until December.
Yeah, but we didn't cover it the first 2 months.
Okay,
But
So
they're
there's
employed.
3 months.
So it's really 3 months.
that there was no health insurance.
thank you.
We won't see those discrepancies, I think, next year because we'll have a full year of
Yeah.
people being on.
The retirement plan contributions, that's a one-time expense last year.
The correction that correction that I'm making.
I see that. Well, no, go ahead.
Okay, so the new rate doesn't kick in until January. So draft 1 assumed the rate kicked in October 1. And then I got to looking at it, and the actual new rate doesn't start till January. So we have 3 months at the old rate at 9.32. Then it drops to 1.6 in January. So that's why I had to go back and add that number back in.
And the projected 2019, that's showing non-public safety employees, the 34,000 for the lives
That is
That's just
the,
public safety.
that's the public safety at 9.32.
Are you keeping a running total on the amount of money we just,
I'm keeping track of what I need to move, but I'm not adding it up as I go, because we don't know how much of how much of that 12 is, the 12 is wrong, it needs to be adjusted, then we're going to break out some of the other numbers, so.
will you have that by tomorrow? Mike?
Are you adopting the budget tomorrow night or the tax rate?
They have to have the proposed tax rate for publication purposes.
It's adopting a rate.
All right, I just wonder.
Yeah, because typically what we try to do is before you adopt this budget is we get another month of actual in there. So that when you're, I mean, we weren't planning on you actually adopting a budget, just a rate.
Yeah, just the maximum tax rate for publication notice purposes.
I know, I just was trying to figure out what that, what's the budget before you set the tax rate.
You're not adopting a rate.
Nice little fellow.
It's hard for that to happen.
It's a process.
It is.
All right, where are we at?
Do we need to go into executive session to talk personnel issues?
All right, if we need to go into executive session, it is 8:42.
You want to read?
Where is it? Yeah. Gonna recess into executive session in accordance with Texas Government Code 551.074, personnel matters to deliberate the appointment, employment, evaluation, reassignment, duties, discipline, or dismissal of a public officer or employee, city administrator / city secretary, assistant to the city secretary, building permit technician, fire chief / fire marshal, assistant fire chief, and firefighters. All right. And it is
Up to 8:42.
8:42. We'll recess into executive session.
Do we take a break just as we go in here? 2-second break? to-
Yes, take
Facilities?
5 minutes and then we'll convene in there.
Thank you.
Or you can just kick us out.
Apologize I was late. I had to change and I can smell the salmon on my hands. I grabbed a piece of salmon real quick on the way out the door.
We did get the streaming to work tonight.
Good, I saw your text.
I'll wait out here. If you just let me know if you have questions.
Yes,
Just
ma'am.
wait out here.
Yes, sir. Appreciate it. Nice to meet you, sir.
But it was his suggestion, because he's going to do it. Right. Because we're a small community, we're a small community. And we don't have to do it. I agree. Keep, obviously. But, he's here.
The city planner?
Not only is he, yes.
Was it the city planner who was speaking of?
Who was the first yes?
We had it was Dan Jackson, and he represented Wildan, which is a utility
No,
rate study.
that was the second guy. Who was the first?
Oh, the first one was Carl Tanner.
Yeah, it was your
Yeah,
Interesting.
I've heard him speak. He's very,
Yeah, he
I
is.
think it's good. Yeah. He's speaking on virtues of, I mean, we could really, community, become very desirable. So, we've already been out, listening to what you're about. We've got everything we need, so it gives it.
I was looking at what was a lot
What
of.
do you think you'll end up getting your number out of them tonight? I mean, you have to.
Let me see if they have any more questions for you. Maybe you can go.
I
and can
have
just-
to. Yeah, I've got to.
Okay.
I've got to get, so.
I'll send it to you as soon as I know.
Yeah, I can run through these changes, but then again, this is just the second iteration, we'll clean it up, but, you know, typically, we'll get July done, and then we'll be able to get even a better projection, because so much of this is based upon the projections that we'll get it done there.
I'm going to put the notice together, but there's some language in there I might need a little bit of help with. So I'm going to draft it and get it all ready to go. And then when they have the proposed rate ready tomorrow night, by 11 o'clock the next morning, I have to have that to the paper. So
Okay.
will you be available the following morning, Wednesday morning?
Yeah, if you can get it to me,
I'll try to send it to you that night.
yeah, get it to me that night so that I can hit it first thing Wednesday morning.
All right. All right. Thank you much.
You bet.
Thanks for coming.
You're welcome. I'll turn that off. I got so many electronic things going here. I've got internet going on my phone.
Plenty of increase without raising the tax rate, and in fact, it should be lower. So, you guys are about to get a major increase.
They were talking about that earlier. They may hold that off. With this second guy's, he's to see what appropriate rates would be.
Yeah, I hope we're not going to use general fund to do that, because you get a PID. And Ray, did you ever get a determination on that?
It wouldn't be the PID that would fund it, it would be the utility fund that would fund it.
Correct, but yes, but it's the same, you know. Essentially, yeah, I mean, I don't know how else to describe it, but if something goes awry, those in that, now is it by phase? That was my understanding.
The rate or the study?
Oh, no, I'm talking about if the street breaks and it causes, you know.
I think all of it is together. I think
So it doesn't matter what phase you're in?
I'll have to ask the administrator. We've got the SAP and update that's coming tomorrow, so I haven't read that part yet. I'll look into that.
Because we asked that question, and what I remember is that if it's in phase one, if that break is in phase one, then you're in phase one, they're working on phase two.
I'll have to get some clarity on that. I'm not sure.
I think people are going to do that. Great. Okay, yeah, so you kind of think, okay, great. All right, so you're right.
Yeah, and then AbbVie contributed every bit of that.
I know, yes. And I'm so, actually, I was frustrated to hear that the assessor's office forced our hand in finding the administrator, but now I'm actually very glad because this guy is so much more competent than that number was, or at least the way he sounds. So,
But, you know, that's probably one single biggest thing to get nailed down because we thought the same thing, and then when AbbVie was here, and Scott was in on the meeting, but you weren't.
Was Abby here? Abby not here anymore, is it?
This goes back like a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
And so we laid out the scenario to him if there was a major repair.
Yes.
How is it paid for? Because we were concerned about the small assessment.
And what did he say?
He said that it is understood that the assessment only would be designed to cover part of it, and that the whatever balance would come from ad valorem revenue.
Oh my goodness.
And I looked at him and I said, no one understands that. Right. No one understands.
Right.
From the very beginning, we always understood that it would somehow get paid for through the maintenance fund. And he said no. And so
You basically just said,
You know, it wasn't, I looked at my notes, it wasn't boiled in there, because one said it was state of council.
I said that needs to be,
I agree.
because he sees your stuff.
Abby did? Oh, I know, yeah, but it was Daniel Pascal who, see, we didn't ask Abby that. It was when we brought in everybody, we brought in Russell Phillips on that. And that's when David explained to us that if something goes awry, well, then the city would pay for it, but in the next tax season, everyone would be in tax for it. So that he's the one who told, I looked at my notes, I thought it was what I didn't say. So the attorney, the city attorney, David, I'm sure you're.
Everybody understood the way it,
Yeah,
you know, and Abby is the one who said that, well, it's, in other words, it would be an impossibility to go back and prospectively change that assessment to cover if there was a catastrophic event. And I said, well, I just don't believe that anyone understands that to be that way. And our point was that the assessment was weak. In other words,
Yes.
wasn't building up enough reserve
Right.
to cover it.
Right. Well, you could have told us that when I was there, and you were concerned about that, and we asked them that same question, and that's when they said, no, everything's where it needs to be, but I think that was when Scott said, I'm going to get into it, I guess, you guys brought it in. It doesn't make sense to me if a mud district and a pit they act similarly in certain situations, and that would be one of the situations, but the mud would be better for those pit.
Now, I mean, we may be worried about nothing that ever happens.
Well, not our last one, I think. Yeah.
We would just want to say that we were aware of what it would be, and there was a plan in place, and it's not like we didn't know that was a possibility.
Right. But it was sure, boy, we was not worried about that tax bill. You know, if it did something, if it did happen. I mean, I would be. So, yeah. So you're saying that they were delaying that. So is the status of the for snow already, sewer rates?
Yeah, $55 a month right now. And I think you guys are going to roll back to June like that when we're going to start.
We're going to leave it where it is. They can decide to reflect the same, all the information gathered and all about today.
That's going to have
I can charge the bid, I already did that.
But it's going to come out of the utility fund, not the.
It will come out of the utility.
you so for the maintenance fund, not the general fund.
Right.
Okay, gotcha, okay, that's all. Right, good. Makes sense.
Yeah.
And I equate the utility fund with the maintenance fund with it. So,
Yeah.
They sound.
I think what I thought I was being asked last week was that was going to be charged to the kid by adding things to reimburse.
No, it's just coming out of the sewer utility fund reserves.
Okay, well, that's fine. Because Scott wrote the same thing.
I said this stuff.
Yeah, good. All right, good.
Water is completely under general fund, so that's where I plugged it in.
I probably said it that way,
Yeah.
it's not what I meant. I think I thought somebody was asking me to charge the kid.
Right.
I have a question, you guys. I noticed the public safety budget is currently at a pretty large deficit. So, yeah, there's a pretty large surplus in the draft issue for the general fund. Are you going to use that to offset the deficit for the public safety budget? Or is that just something that really goes up?
So the public safety,
Here's the general fund, right? And so the general fund has a pretty good number. That's awesome.
so the public safety, the net public safety cost,
Oh, it's very in the general.
it's very, yeah. what do you do the math?
So we're getting set up for tomorrow?
What's that?
We're getting this set up for tomorrow?
No, for tonight. I had to be at my daughter's middle school or parent organization, so I was late coming in, but I was hoping that they would broadcast. Anyway.
They're still,
So they're all the same day. No, I have these numbers.
Typically, they just come out and say nothing is decided, so we wouldn't pack.
so you have quite a lot of stuff. So is this, this is part of your regular job? Is this a hobby?
It's a hobby.
Well, you put on some entertaining
Yeah, well, I still have a show now.
Oh, really? You still have a show?
Yeah, I go on twice weekly, and they know what's going on. That's why I'm
I
doing
need to
this.
get,
Oh,
I
okay.
only followed you
During the campaign? Yeah. It's just bunkerbob.com. Yeah. So, just trying to keep informed. Yeah, I don't know about that. I mean, that's my opinion. So we all have to my opinion. Just keep everybody informed.
even though I think he knows.
Well, right
This is
now,
too small committee.
yeah, so right now,
But he was saying some committees, it's better to own the regular, not to own the water.
Oh, yeah.
And that makes sense.
Sure.
And I'm thinking, yeah, but if you're too small, it doesn't make sense.
Well, we can't. We've actually, and it was one of the developers, one of the guys who developed some of the work, he talked.
Oh, Russell?
No, it was, say his name, but he came before us, or not us. It was being broadcast. So it was recent. And it basically talked about the fact that they tried to, one of the things that they tried to do was create, develop city water into that. And really, that was one of the things that they realized that they learned that they cannot, cities prohibited. So even if they wanted to create water, the city would just build it. So, yeah, you're right. I mean, it's expensive. Yeah, for sure. I guess the only way, if RCH gave us the city, maybe, but I don't know how else they could do it.
Now, I'll tell you, it's not very.
Really?
I think they are. Oh, we should be talking about, now you're going to rant rave.
No. Well, I'm not a big fan of RCH, I will say that. I've never been a fan of RCH, even as mayor, so.
But so I only hear that from builders that are there. I talk to the construction engineers that are. And he was saying, they're going to have twice the number of houses, units together.
Right.
Because I was actually asking about water pressure. It seemed like it wasn't really strong. I came from, it was 140 PSI in the street. The regulator for your house.
Oh, yeah.
And you had a separate regulator for the irrigation system.
Oh, really?
And when you have that big a difference, because I regulate down to like 50 or 60 PSI for the house, that big a difference. Flush toilets, or faucets, dishwasher, you don't see any pulse because the regulators are $300 a piece. They're really good and they maintain that pressure continuously. And they're like instantaneous. It's water, it's food, so it's instantaneous.
Sure.
But well, not our house.
Oh, really? So,
well, so he said that's what they need to do. He says they're going to have to do at some point is pull another line from the street.
Oh, really?
That's what this builder said. His opinion, I don't know, he's a water expert. He does say that the builders have talked to the water people. They won't be able to talk to that. Yeah, we know.
the RCH. Is it RCH?
Well, it is, but he says both of them are that way. Because I said it's an RCH, he goes, well, it's also, but RCH is the same way.
Oh, gee, okay. Well, I'm not surprised.
Well,
The
this is
RCH
elementary,
is.
but I made
is
that for him
terrible.
just so I could see the difference.
Because they're,
You know, like
they're
when we
supposed to be
bump,
not,
this is at
they're
15,
not
this is
for
at
profit,
16,
that
this
means
is
that
at
they're
17.
non-profit, it's just not for
And
profit.
portion,
And,
and it's really
They take advantage of that, I'll tell you.
minimal.
But, it's just not, this is a
You know,
very.
especially when you're looking at the other portions. You know, and people just look at that bottom number, they don't really think
Just,
about it.
I tried to buck the system, and, I worked for a couple of years, and that was better.
So it wouldn't bother me.
It's just, it is what it is. Just have to. But I'm glad that you came to see what's happening. Your state is better. That's really important.
I can't make tomorrow's meeting, so I'll show up to the race to help us.
Was there anything like that you caught on TV?
No, it was interesting. I enjoyed listening to, like I said, the plan guys.
Yeah.
Then going over the budget was interesting to me.
I wonder why we want to that's the manager in operation. Well, that whole thing was just slamming down the road.
Well, yeah, I think it was that Ranger stuff.
Right?
The Ranger.
Yeah. It's hard to fight fire, but I just think we have, professional firefighters who are often humans instead of going. But all firefighters were 1 day on, 2 days off, so they all have part-time jobs. So you hire, you're talking about Dallas, Fort Worth, all these fire departments, what's the hard? What's that?
It'd be hard to do.
What's that?
It just seems that you've got all these different places that people
Yeah.
to rely upon. And they have their range of, which is Dallas.
Yeah.
And then they support.
No, they would come, that would be their part-time job. And so what you got is someone who has experience, which these guys do not. That's one of the big issues. They've got training, they've got all their certifications, they've got all their insurance. So the only thing you're paying them is an hourly wage. So you have very high skilled, highly trained people serving our community for a fraction. A fraction is still going to be, it's good, but you don't have the training, you don't have the insurance. And insurance is one of the big issues. You don't have pension, you don't have any of that stuff. So the problem is,
What about equipment? How do you deal with equipment?
you still have to have equipment.
There's still,
Absolutely, but yeah,
because that came up today, that's a pretty good
yeah.
And where it goes, the price that is our time.
Yeah.
It goes quick.
Yeah. Exactly. What we're leasing, are we still leasing the fire trucks, or do we actually purchase those?
Well, it's called a lease, but we really, we're buying them like this.
So it's a lease and purchase? It's a
We
lease.
call it municipal lease, but we purchase them, or we do them, and we have a title to them, and we just have to pay this for 2 years.
2 more years? One of the ours? So how much were they?
The 60,000 for 3 years, I think we might be something down on top of that. Well,
How old are these trucks?
I got a list over here somewhere.
Yeah, he was saying something about that, 13 years, or some. Well, that's probably hosing.
I think it's 20 years. I mean, these are diesels, so when you're talking about very little use. I mean, if they're highly used, then yeah, but if they're not used very much,
So there's a lot of cats in this.
you're right about that. Just like.
well, the demand on vehicles is cheap,
That the fire department? Well, I know that.
Okay, then,
I'm just-
no need to worry about it anymore.
But the thing that you're not talking about is how are we going to pay for continuing, salaries? And if you don't have the money, that's one of the questions you have to get.
It looks like they have the money. And I saw the two separate funds, I thought they were separate, I saw a huge deficit. But it's already, it is part of the calculation you guys are telling me, so it seems to be working.
Yeah, well, it's in the same agreement.
Yes, now, once the paper grant goes away,
How big is that? Is that a 300,000? Well, that's
it's about 242,000 a year.
How would you feel about this? So when I was mayor, she did most of that work. And she's the reason we got that same grant. And you know what percent of that she took? 0. She didn't take one. She didn't get a percentage of it. Well, that's what the old volunteer fire department, the fire chief's brother was the quote unquote grant writer, got 10% of every grant.
I don't want to hear it.
No, that's why I'm where I am. So I mean, she worked her tail off. She and Scott, and she deserves a lot of credit. I don't think a lot of people know that. So.
Well, there's always got to be a brains and outfit somewhere.
Well, it was a lot of just growth. I mean, those grant requests, that was I don't know how many hours she put into that. But it was a lot. It was the first time the city's got something like that.
Yeah, I see your name all over the place. Lisa,
I am.
Yeah.
Chris Cooney. Oh, Chris Cooney. Okay, so if someone's watching, they're telling me, okay, it was Chris Cooney who stood up here. It was earlier this week. Thank you. That they did try when they were doing some over, they did try to create for the city water department. And actually, in RC, it wasn't RCH, it was the municipal water district or whatever. In the state of Texas, they said, McLendon-Chisholm cannot have one, so it's not possible. There's something else. 162,500. What is this? This is a whole conversation for sure.
is he broadcasting this
Okay,
to the internet?
The infrastructure,
We are too. It actually worked today.
the infrastructure,
This is you.
is it broadcasting? Because they're saying it's not. Is it broadcasting? Let me know.
It's showing it as live on here. My little live button is up.
The live button is on. So that's why I came. I was like, they're not broadcasting. So
I mean, we worked really hard for the last 2 days to make sure
Did you?
it was working. Yes.
good for you.
I had accidentally got here this afternoon because when we got the video back, we lost the audio.
Oh, are you serious?
Yeah, I'm hopeful that it was working the way it's supposed to, but it shows that it's working. I don't have it up live on the website though, so I guess Tom will tell me.
Oh, it's not live on the website.
It should be live on the website.
You should just do a long trip.
What's that?
Oh, you got one right here.
Well, it shows what's here, isn't it?
Do you have a browser on there?
I can look. So Fate, I understand, is raising their tax rate above the effective rate, 5 cents.
I don't know what the amount is. I heard it was a proposed tax increase, and I haven't heard the amount.
Yeah, I've gotten a lot of a lot of people from Fate are calling me saying for equipment and truck. Okay, 165. Okay, so for the equipment and truck, yeah, 162.5. Got it. Yes, that's right. So
That's right. We had to buy some gears for some smaller equipment as well, I think. So there may have to be trucks and some smaller things. I don't quite remember what we purchased altogether. I think.
your name is David Black, right?
No,
Yeah.
no.
Okay, David Black. Say, who is that? All right. Let's see.
I wish I would have known you were
Oh, I'm sorry. I guess we should put a little sign up or something. I'm afraid
It
to
says it's waiting.
I'm afraid to stop it because there used to be two buttons on there. One said stop and one said complete. The complete one meant you were done with the whole thing. But now I just see stop, so I'm afraid to hit stop because I don't know if that will get it, and I can't get back to it.
Now, there's a link to this on your website.
Yes.
It's on your website.
If you, under the government tab, it will say agendas and live meetings or something like that.
Well, I see a video,
At least it's not always come
next to it.
But probably picks it, usually there's a couple that are on, so I assume it picks it up.
Probably should hear you better when we're at their places. This is the last workshop we have scheduled, and they want to do another one, so we'll be back at the regular places for tomorrow morning.
Yeah, it's, I would have, this is what we're doing. So it's just saying waiting for, so you can talk to the Axios. Yeah, hopefully it's recording.
So is your link for this at Bunker Park? Okay.
Yeah, I'm on it.
It was interesting. It was
Thanks for joining
fun
us.
to watch. I was curious about the budget. I had another question I was going to ask them, but it's a sensitive subject for lots of people for some reason. I don't know. But it's been a little over 3 months since that survey was due back from the residents. Is there going to be a result of that survey?
I have them send me another mic across the page.
Oh, okay. Okay, great.
Send me one.
Okay, great.
Right, right. Oh, that is, where's my brother?
I have been wrong with justice. Okay. Wow. My entire professional career was in other places.
Oh, is that right?
So it's time to retire.
We're used to the bulk of the Oh, really?
I don't know if I have said it. No, it's not. But, yeah, it's almost all.
Sounds, Jesus. Yes, it is. I think you're right. I think you're right. Oh, yes, he is. Okay. He just said it. Yes. Wow. A lot of people around the state.
I'm not one of them.
Yeah, you want to.
So we got the Brazilian president of Dallas playing on the first row. Yeah, my sister lives in Long Beach. Yeah, that's where we're at.
Yep. Well, see, you can see, here's the program, here's what we do that out. So, let's press that box. So, now people can hear. Yeah.
the rainwater, he said something about grants for our sewer system. And in order, so those are the same, so we have to worry about, I'm going, is it sponsored?
Joe.
I'm just
Oh, yeah.
and then Scott pipes out and because I don't have a four-wheeler garage house.
Right.
But I thought that was but not that they I don't know.
It's first.
We're not going to be Scott's the one who screwed us off.
She's got good bids and it's part of the business. Rather than just kind of all this stuff.
There's another Facebook side. Yeah, I'm going to be saying something about. Yeah, that's not this one.
No, that's when the mobile created, it's really designed not to be it's
I'm just interested in this first one. It's not the most, it's not
oh, okay, she has things.
Yeah. And, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I was really happy when I was new. And so I researched you guys, used some council. But I was thinking to myself, yes, why did I just have this? I said, let me go to California, which is good. It's unnecessary. But consider it. They put out lots of information on the candidates. So the candidates produce, and they have, when they have propositions, they have arguments, all this true. I was kind of expecting, I'll get some paper, but then I'll very soon, when I went like this, oh, this is this and now. I didn't even know about it. Well, you know the website, how do I go around this? And so, I figured all this stuff out, and that's fine. But there's nothing about candidates, unless you're
Right.
and so I knew there was a problem with lifestyle. I just, I must have gone pretty early in the city, it took me a few days, I don't want to spend a little bit of time or something. And this, it was at least a 10 to 1 on Sunday.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, I don't want to believe it's like this,
Right.
but it's, a lot of people vote based on record recognition.
Right.
And so they need to keep up with it.
Right.
And they have to put on the field and make themselves. Pretty much.
Right. Actually, yeah.
Well,
In the exception of the pack.
right.
Yeah. And this time they used another pack and they notifications stuff.
Right. Yes. That's why I assume they didn't have it, because, what was the other one? Nothing else happened. And I thought that the new guy, David, I think he's really excited.
Yes, he is. That's right. Instead of discussion.
But, and the thing was, like, Scott did all these videos explaining all the levels of the job. He did a great job. The word is really getting out. The vast majority of people in the city didn't know what the was.
Right.
And that's just me.
There's so much negative out there about basically poison water, and that whole pack, that's all they do, it's just throwing mud at them. So, yeah, in a small election, we normally have
Yes.
I'm sorry, we need a senior, some kind of superintendent to do that work for you guys. Because, I mean, you know, I was trying to springboard as best I could, you know, but when people say, "Dude, what side?"
We never went to, we never set up.
That was at the end. That was at the very end. Yeah. So, you know, I had enough. That's the only reason I did it. And so that's what started.
What I'm saying is that we never went out when you were on or after.
That's right.
And did supervision type because that protocol was done with the water this morning. This is,
He lives in your house in California.
And it was just a couple of us from
Oh, it's all right.
then what I'm going to say is none of you painful to you. It's going to be painful to your father. They're going to. Well, they're saying it's just they're trying to roll this water forward. So they're trying to get it into the
that it was coming from it's fine. We told them that it's not coming from. So she was ready to talk about her about
Yeah, tonight. They changed that. But he said,
He did, and he said, why? Because he even said that Lisa, oh, I'm sorry, when I heard general fund, I was thinking general fund, and this is the general, what she was talking about. And I used to bid interchangeably with the maintenance fund and bidders. But Lisa is differentiating between those funds, or it's being separate from the bid.
but it's not.
Totally maintenance, correct. But it's, I look at all that as a bid, and that's my problem. So I need to change the way I talk about that, so that it's more clear. Because right now, I just don't know what I'm doing.
Well, there are specific legal constraints on what you do. Right. And so that's why I got this.
Right. Yeah. I guess it's
Well, I'm not gonna go.
he's an engineer, so he can't change more technical. I'm more simple. You guys can probably talk
Let's
about
start this off with really misunderstood. Instead of weddings, and then stress. He was saying because providing the water supply, we won't get into it. But then when we're talking about sewer,
drink water.
Yeah.
The only time, I can see how somebody might get confused because there's a huge rainstorm and the sewer processing place in the floor. That's the only time when they mix.
That's at the end of the line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Plus that, manuals and stuff start coming out, then you pressure. All over.
Nice. Anyway, I was sort of saying, oh, just,
You saw the email from the thing.
Just kind of.
Yeah, and yesterday, we responded to this today about line copy you manager. So they're wanting to do a rollback. And want to do a position like this. We're raising about cents. It's actually, they have all this commercial development. I mean, their commercial development is just gaming busters. Okay, that's supposed to be the saving. You have more commercial development or it's probably just, that's not happening. It's just a wash. So are they going to address, so that they address those who live outside the fire district and they're going to
well, it's not good here.
Golly.
I think that's just kind of talking about the trees, because they were.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It would have been better had it been put trees. Yeah. Wait, he was telling me that. I remember somebody. I remember somebody. Right. Well, yeah, I never had. Well, I wonder if what's the big sense of all that stuff. Is he, he was in the lawsuits I'm pretty sure if there was something in there about that, because I talked to him about that. He would, see, I don't think well, it's not the problem. They have a requirement. They have to. Not what's in it. They're not the problem. Not problem is technically not the problem. So, there's just another way you say it, but not the problem. You can carry that over. You can carry it. Sure, there's a lot of mentions. There's a lot of mentions. There's a lot of those. The same thing. The not profit and non it's no pressure. They're not the same. When I worked for the hospital, and they were non-profit, not and this is what we were doing. You can just think about it. Because it doesn't carry that over. Because they don't make any money. But non-profit, 501c3s, I work with 501c3s. This is not profits, but they have all this extra non-profits. So, ministries, they have revenue surpluses. Regardless, I think that they have to disclose certain things a lot. And I know that they have to disclose, I'm not sure what they are, the categories down, categories 4 or some other kind. Because inherently that no, you're not. But they're delivering, but you're getting service. So for instance, if I pay for a banquet ticket to a not correct. Yeah, it's the same thing. Yeah. Well, they might be doing the deduction. Just for the, they didn't see my receipts.
Of course, it's like what I asked you to do. Move the church.
Yeah.
us in the same page.
Oh, yes, yes. No, absolutely, you are correct. Yeah.
But you are getting paid.
Yes.
Yeah, but somebody else is doing it.
No, that's not enough. See,
That's not what you
that's the misconception right there.
That's not what you said. You said that you're paying.
I don't do
But you have to oversee that if you yourself would occupy you way beyond your pay.
Well, a lot of people be able to do the things that they do on a daily basis. Any department you go to, keeping up with their employees. But you're keeping up with. I also am asked to do that, so I assist as needed. Yes. That is outside of our work. Well, you wouldn't be able to do this. I'm not doing code enforcement all the time. I'm definitely in front of cases, and that's just a matter of typing emails to them, things to do. So I don't do code enforcement. I haven't.
I heard you. Last year, whatever, you wanted to get $12.
No? I don't want to get $12.
I
Oh,
thought
you're talking about,
you
talking
wanted
about.
to do animal.
No, but I'll do whatever.
Or here, here, I do the salary now, 4,000, let's do it. Yes, the original was 50,
Yes.
and then we can go on to say, it was supposed to be with the benefits, it was supposed to be 50,000 each year.
I screwed up.
By not including their. See you, Chief.
Back on. Is the fire department's budget their detailed budget? Or having a long executive session is right. Well, no, when they got elected, it was the end of long meetings. So, I don't know what you're saying. This can't be a long meeting. They don't have long meetings. They don't have 8-hour meetings. It was a figment of your imagination. It wasn't recorded, it wasn't broadcast, so it didn't happen. Did I? What was her? Yeah. Oh, I know. Here's a possible. Oh, really? Yeah. Huh. Where'd you get that
Denise, this is the second time I've seen this.
Oh, yeah. Oh, really? Is it good?
He didn't work out. No, really, but we did find that he's had some risk. So that may be the reason why he's talking to the same.
Never seen Mick Jagger doing something like that. I'm always waiting to see us come through this. He really gets up. He does all that. He's entertaining. That's how I say it. It is, it's broadcast.
I'm thinking.
You see it later. It says,
Just doing my better or work imitation.
how was it? Thumbs up, thumbs up. Come on, let's hear some thumbs up. As I was talking about, I'm over there talking to him, Adrian, hear me, clearly I'm saying. So I was saying that somebody had spoken of this just a few months ago, I spoken to the council planning together. They were called to work. They looked at the city getting the water. Learned that they cannot do it. It's not impossible. Reason that so got to tell me about that. So she's like, I was like, why is he doing that? She said, those are roses. I said, no, that's Is he currently as a city employee?
He was.
Okay. It was terrible. She said your federal work was terrible. Come on, give me that. You got it. So yes, I just wanted to see salaries. What about Chris Cooney? I already said. That's the salaries 3. Gee. Wow. Well, this is general business. This is staff salaries. No. Including both fire chiefs. Why do we have 2 fire chiefs? Did they ask that question? Well, he did. What he did. And so they are broken down to the salaries, except for just one great thing. That's she says you're funny. Okay. Sorry. Salaries. Yeah, that's what we're looking at. He's saying that the salaries for the public safety isn't right from last year's budget. $70,000. $70,000 a person.
And that doesn't include all the other stuff. This is for
16 firefighters is going to be $70,000.
That's what you're supposed to budget.
So there's not, it's not included. Maybe they're including the chief, maybe the other chief.
That's what I was.
It's got to be 7. Can we make a request for the breakdown of the salaries? As a result of the sewage issue, they're going to, sounds like they are going to not increase it this year. They're going to do the study and pass it off to next year. Pass the buck, kick the can down the road. They're looking at the same thing we are. So we don't have a breakdown of the salaries.
Yeah. They're taking $75,000. Is anything over into there?
Yeah.
Still has
Jeez. How much did we agree? People who have almost no experience buying cars. No, I'm talking about the firemen. Guys who salary of a firefighter in Dallas? Oh, quite a bit. I got your. No, you got your dollars reported. I got your letter. Yeah, that's right. Okay, $24,000 to $68,000. Salary. Fire rescue officer is $60,000 to $79,000. You're saying 57? And $60,000 is the starting pay. And then so we are paying comparable to what Dallas is paying. Well, if that's right.
Before you say that, we don't know what's going to be like.
The fire department is actually at $420,000. Is the budget. Hey, listen, yeah, your computer is battery dies.
Okay.
Time is 10:06. Meeting reconvene, no action taken in executive session. All right. That's it. And we've gone through everything prior to my getting here, and we've gone down to the bottom. Is there anything on this that we need to talk about? Then it's still 10:06, meeting adjourned.